All right. It buttons clicked. It's going. Welcome to episode 20 of Overgrow the System to the Free Rifleman.
What's going on, Josh? How you doing?
It's a crazy time to be alive these
Yes,
days.
it is. Yes, it is.
And I mean that's all like dependent on how old you are, right? I can't imagine how crazy it would look if I was like, 80 or 90 years old. That would just
Yeah, because folks who have lived through some really terrible times are just in disbelief of what's going on right now.
yeah. Yeah, I mean, they went through the last Great Depression, right? Some people that are still alive.
Yeah, and the the economic situation, I think, is probably more dire than just the fact that we've got some crazy ass maybe made up and maybe not virus that's targeting specific age groups.
Yeah, I mean, aside from the virus on top of everything, like the economic situation that we're in, like, and everybody's been saying this bubble is gonna burst. Um,
Yeah,
but
yeah,
it's
that
just
was just a matter of time.
it's hilarious that it's at the exact same time as all of this on top.
Yeah, I think that the weakness in the market and the fact that the bubbles are all bursting, that was just a matter of time. Um, the irony is that it just, like you said, it all happened at the same time. I don't think that's, well, it could be by design, but I'd be surprised if they actually meant it to be like this. But it certainly is raining down some horror in the oil markets and in the gold. Nobody can find gold. Um, it's just general mayhem.
There is actual horror going on in Alberta right now because our economy is so based on oil, and it
Yeah,
would, we were taking a beating before all this happened, and now, like, we just had one project cancel in at this tech coal mine where we lost like, something like 1 million jobs, and now that the price of oil is just so amazingly low, I don't see any project going live around here in a while.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And you know, sometimes I come across a little celebratory when I talk about markets crashing and the economic collapse and things like that. And I, I don't mean to be disrespectful to the people who are the greatest affected by this, because honestly, they're the ones that I feel for the most, because they're the people that aren't responsible for this. They're the people who are literally just holding on by the skin of their teeth. And so, to your viewers, I just don't want anybody to get the idea that as a collapsitarian that I'm celebrating, the end of um, their livelihoods. Unfortunately, I think in this situation, and certainly just economic wise, there's as a collapsitarian, the belief is that the system has to collapse, because there is no fixing what is broken, and that's the premise of what I have posed as the only possible solution. I don't think that you can vote your way to freedom, and so I just wanted to preface that before I talked about how the it, the mess in the markets is basically a result of the failure of central planners, which happens every single time. Central planners uh, are able to do a lot of dastardly things like manipulating markets. They can manipulate the gold market to where they buy gold when it's artificially low, and then they can allow the price to come up. And they can shift from one commodity to the other that way. Sometimes they get investigated. Sometimes they actually serve a jail sentence. But more times than not, it seems like bankers are the hardest. Well, bankers and probably the politicians that enable them to do what they do are the hardest to ever actually have any justice for. Truthfully,
It's
I think the system is designed to protect them.
100%. It reminds me of that one old quote. I don't know if you know it, where it's like they they privatize the gains and then they
Yeah,
publicize. How do you?
publicize the loss. Yeah,
Yeah, I'm screwing up
yeah,
the words, but it's like they go hardcore capitalist on all the things they gain and hardcore socialist on all the things they lose, and it
yeah,
only applies to
yeah,
them.
yeah. And it's interesting because you can see it in the bailouts, right? And I think that some of what we're experiencing is just a continuation of what was happening in '08 with the subprime crisis. But the fact is that when everybody talks about how the economy is getting better, or that it was that it was the strongest that it's ever been since the '08 crisis, the fact is that all we did was just blow up a whole bunch more bubbles, and you're seeing them crash and collapse right now. And at the risk of sounding insensitive, I'm kind of celebrating that, just simply because the boom and bust cycle that that Keynesian school economics creates uh, hurts the largest number of people across the board. But for some reason, it makes a certain percentage of people the most amount of money, which is why we stick with it. And for some reason, I don't know why, but we seem to keep thinking that this is the right way to do things. And it's really bizarre to me that people aren't questioning the wisdom of the central banks right now and looking at it and saying, wait, isn't there a different way to do this? Isn't there a way that we can do this, that for whatever reason, we haven't seen a banker throw themselves out of the 32nd floor um, in my lifetime.
It's because they keep getting juicy bailouts.
Yeah. And in 29, it was dangerous to walk down the street because there were so many of them jumping from the whatever floor. And I kind of think that maybe we need to see more of that.
I mean, they gamble and we pay their debts.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
I completely agree. It's wild that we
Yeah.
continue doing it and nobody seems to have any sort of issue with the fact that over and over and over again, a certain little group of people keep making out really well in this situation.
Yeah. Yeah. And, at the risk of sounding like I want wealth distribution, I have to put that caveat in there that, free markets are the best way to have your wealth distribution. But the problem is that right now, we're not really experiencing free markets. What we're experiencing is sort of like a crony capitalism. It's honestly, it's not really capitalism at all. It's probably more akin to some type of mercantilism, or I guess what would be the other word I'm looking for? I guess you could say that to a degree we're experiencing a corporatist market where you have the government and corporations operating in collusion. And, you know, again, some of this I speak to the US because, you know, that's where I live. But I would imagine that you probably find a lot of the problems that the US experiences in Canada as well.
Oh, absolutely. I'm pretty sure Canada as a country is literally a corporation listed in an American stock trading like
Yeah.
it's a corporation. They don't even make any sort of attempt to hide it anymore. Like,
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and that kind of gets back to the fact that, you know, and I've said this for a while, that, you know, we're cattle. And I don't like being a cow. I don't like that. That's not my nature. And unfortunately, I think that's kind of how things are set up. It was, you know, set up that way long before I was born, and you know, there's not much you can do to change that, other than um, figure out a way to close and shut down the plantations.
kind of comes to agorism, where you use the
Yeah,
gray and black
yeah,
market to
yeah,
make profits where the state has no impact, or
yeah.
like their fingers, they don't have their fingers in your pockets.
Hmm.
uh Frick, I was trying to set up a website to start using some sort of, make a little bit of money on the internet selling things like sort of farmers market thing. And
Hmm.
that is so freaking complicated. They want me to set it all up with like credit cards and tax information.
Yeah,
It didn't take me long before I was like, oh, let's just use the black market again.
yeah. It's funny how the black market is or the gray market, if you will, because, you
Yeah,
know, the gray market is not necessarily dealing in things that are illegal so much as just dealing in things that that work around tax laws. So gray markets are more like a tax evasion kind of process, and you know, trying to evade the tax man. And then black markets are a combination both of that and as well dealing with things that are illegal. But I make the demarcation between in black markets and in agorism in the fact that it's I have no issue with malum prohibitum laws being violated. And what that means is that if you're not doing something that creates a victim, then I have no issue with that. My issue is just, like, for instance, I'll give you an example. You know, things like child porn. There's obviously a victim here
yeah,
in that instance, and so to me, that is not a malum prohibitum crime. That is actually a malum in se crime, which means there is in fact a victim. And right now, I think that there's quite a bit of that going on. You know, we're kind of finding some more out about Epstein. Apparently, it sounds like he had links between him and the was it Weinstein?
oh,
Yeah,
no big
apparently there was a linkage between the two, and not just the fact that they were wealthy and
yeah.
influential, but actually there was a link between the movement of people of certain ages between them, which is pretty disgusting.
Yeah,
I guess
I
one
mean,
was a talent scout for the other.
that's so fucked.
Yeah.
I remember in high school back in the day when I was in school, they're saying that the number of humans in slavery is like significantly higher than it ever was before, just because there's so many billions more people on the earth, and there is that sort of thing going on. Like, we
Well,
in
and
our
they have a
normal
more
lives, we
organized form. They have
sorry,
a more no, it's okay. They have a better organized form of slavery than they ever did before. You know, if I don't know if you've ever seen the, was it called, The Nature of Your Enslavement, that video. Um, it's actually a pretty good video, but I want to say it's Stefan Molyneux that did the video, and he talks about, you know, basically how human farming started out with levels of you know, basically chattel slavery, and then slowly as they began to realize that the more freedoms that they offered the slaves, the more productive they were. Eventually they were allowed to have families, and pretty soon they were allowed to live in their little, you know, grass or mud huts, and they were more productive. And then they realized that if they allowed them to have property and they took from the property, that at some point they actually started to actually think that they were free, and along with that process came a much higher yield. And so what they found was that they need fewer slaves because of that. And so what he basically poses is that we're nearing the end of that system, just simply because there are more slaves that there are more slaves to control with the inefficiency of government now than is needed. And so sometimes that kind of corresponds with, you know, the whole belief that the earth needs to be depopulated and stuff like that, because they have a different level of efficiency for the chattel slavery, or the new form of slavery, which is not chattel slavery. It's, I kind of view it as just a series of plantations.
Yeah, like with no fence, you just
Yeah.
Stockholm syndrome yourself into it.
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, there are people that say, well, why would I want to ever go past that fence? I don't, I'm not even interested. You know, this cable TV and sports games and beer that I can go down to the state store and buy, you know, is more than enough. And quite frankly, I've seen a lot of that. It's pretty sad. It's kind of pitiful to think about the fact that people are satisfied with that. But you know, what can you do? You can't make people be free.
No, you can't make them drink. You know, you can take them to water, but you
Yeah,
can't make them drink.
yeah,
Um, it that reminds me of things I'm seeing online, because people are really reacting hard to this, like whether or not the disease is real, the fact that the quarantine, you know, they're putting that all over a bunch of places in America where people are unhappy about it. Um,
yeah, yeah. You know, and the funny thing is, I, all it's done is just kind of focused me on different things that I need to be doing, and so I, quite frankly, I don't mind the quarantine at all, because it just gives me an excuse to work on the projects that I'm working on, longer hours, and you know, not, you know, I've been fortunate enough to be in a position where I'm able to do most of what I need to do via telework. And so for this kind of a situation, it's actually been pretty successful for me. But my heart really goes out to people who have lost their jobs. I don't know if I had told you, but my son, um, he had lost his job. He was working at a restaurant when they shut all the restaurants down. Of course, he went with them, and he was looking at the potential of being homeless, and I did not want to see that happen. So we went and picked him up, and we've tried to integrate him back into the home. He's 19, and it also looks like my daughter is probably going to be moving back in for a short period of time. She's also 19, and so that's the nature of things. And unfortunately, I know that there's not everybody can just move in with somebody. There are some people out there that are really going to suffer from this, and
yeah,
that I really truly you know, feel for them, because you know, that was the exact same circumstance I was trying to have my children avoid.
yeah. I mean, that's absolutely uh, a completely true part about this all. If you don't have that support network to catch you when you're falling,
Yeah.
this is going to be a bad situation for a lot of people.
And unfortunately, I think that the government uh, tries to keep people in a certain frame where that is their their network. That is who they rely on. And so in this case, um, that that's what's going to happen. So people are they're going to look to the government to solve their problems. Whereas my children, and partly just the way I raised them, is that I would rather them look to their parents, family, to help solve a problem. And to their credit, that's basically what they're doing. And not everybody, one, has that option, and two, most people, well, I guess a lot of people, I guess they figure the government is probably better suited to help them.
Yeah, I mean, if your parents are dirt poor,
Hmm.
like if you're supporting them and then all of a sudden this takes you out,
Hmm. Yeah.
uh,
Yeah, especially elderly. If you're taking care of elderly and different things like that, I've heard some pretty sad stories about people that have had to leave work because they have elderly that they're watching at home, and if where they work doesn't allow them to work from home, then they've had to basically quit their job, even at the risk of losing their health insurance, just simply because they don't want to run the risk of getting their loved ones sick. And I think that's a hell of a choice to be put in.
it's a hell of a time.
Yeah.
It's almost, I mean, like it's like you were saying before how you're trying not to come across as um, celebrating the fact that all this
Yeah.
is going. But on the other hand, like it is such a time to be a person that has been, survival minded, prepping for
Hmm.
collapse. Like
Yeah.
it's kind of a smug month, you know?
It's easy to feel that way, but I will tell you that this is the busiest time I've ever been. Um, I bet you I probably get about 50 text messages from people I know a day saying, "Hey, can you help me find 9 millimeter? Can you help me find, I'm looking for a magazine for this. What sling do you recommend?" Because I think they're coming to the realization that there there may there may be a day that the mailman and the brown truck and the white FedEx truck stop rolling up to your door, and they maybe they're at that point where they are seeing that as a potential problem. And I tend to live a little bit more like that could happen at any point, any time. Not everyone views it that way, and that's okay. But for me personally, I would rather just be more self-reliant. And it doesn't mean that I don't enjoy the markets of, the wonderful world of Amazon and Wally World, otherwise known as the Great Wall of China Mart. And I do. I mean, there's definite benefits to globalism from an economic perspective. The fact that you can buy things that are made in China that click right into whatever it is that you own, and functions right away, and it's cheap enough that if it breaks you just throw it away and buy another one. you know those are great options. Unfortunately, I think we're kind of seeing the fragility that also goes along with globalism, from a market perspective. The most dangerous part that I'm not happy with is the globalization of government, and I think that's the dangerous part that a lot of people don't really think about, and they don't realize that if your local government has the potential of being dangerous and your regional government has a potential of being dangerous, the difference is that you're in close proximity to them, so you're a lot more likely to see what it is that they do, and you're certainly in a better position to be able to, maybe a whole bunch of people gather together and say no. How do you do that when it's a global problem, when the global government decides to misbehave or take advantage of your freedoms, and they're halfway around the world and there's nothing you can do about it. And I think that the efforts of globalism from a political standpoint, people like George Soros, who try to destroy the sovereignty of nations in an effort to subvert. And then, of course, they wave this little, yeah, but look at prices are lower. I don't know. iPhones are more expensive now than they ever were. And so I don't, I think we're seeing some of that fragility poke its ugly head out.
Yeah. The veneer of security, it's
Mm-hmm.
it's wearing thin.
Yeah. And I say that as I'm cleaning one rifle while I have another rifle ready to go and charged. You in this world, you don't take both rifles and break them down at the same time, because you might need to be ready to go at a moment's notice. I jest, of course, but to a degree, there is some wisdom in that.
You have I told you about my news where I got a 12 gauge?
Oh, good. That's excellent. If I may have missed it.
I mean, I got a 12 gauge with three kinds of shot. I got birdshot, number 9 buckshot, I think they call it.
Yeah.
Which is like the size of the little BB in there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's birdshot is 9. Mm-hmm.
Right. One of them
Yeah.
is like the bigger one for buck, and then slug.
Yes. Yeah.
It's not
Yeah.
rifle
So
built,
the
so
higher the number, the smaller the pellet, because it's based on a unit of measurement that originated out of Britain, Great Britain.
right. It's some sort of
And
imperial measurement thing.
yes, yeah, sort of. And so you have birdshot, and then you have buckshot. Buckshot comes in different sizes, and based on the size will determine how many of them will be in your
Little
in
shell
the
thing.
in the shell. So yeah. Hmm. Yeah, and I think shotguns are effective, certainly from a home defense standpoint. They're also effective in getting game from a survival standpoint. That is good. Um, I don't see their role in combat as the most effective if you have multiple adversaries, just simply because that means you're carrying a lot more shotgun ammo than perhaps you have capacity to carry, depending on what your adversaries are. And that was partially the case with combat roles. In trench warfare, of course, the shotgun was awful. But what kept people in trenches were machine guns and long guns. And so the only time that the shotgun was really used was once you began that breaching process into a trench, because at that point, something that's more effective is something that can hit, possibly multiple assailants, or one round per assailant. And kind of goes back to the same concept as to why it's a very formidable weapon for within the four walls of the home. There's also a couple different benefits to it, in the fact that it's less likely to overpenetrate certain interior walls, as opposed to handgun rounds or rifle rounds. So there's a group of people out there that absolutely positively worship the shotgun and believe that it can be made to do everything. And I think that to a degree, a shotgun can be used to do everything, but it doesn't do everything well. It only does a few things well. And it's really hard to have that one thing that does everything well. And so, at the risk of upsetting them, I will say that it's not the end all be all. However, at the same time, especially in your situation, it is something that's effective that you can have access to there in Canada, which to me is a great thing. I think that's wonderful. It's at least they let you have that, right?
Absolutely. It was that or cheapo SKS, but for the price range it was in, the SKS could have been decent or it could have been a paperweight, and I'm not
Yeah.
gonna know until I fire it. And once I fire it,
Right.
I can't take it back, of course.
Yeah.
So I just figured shotgun so much easier to deal with, like, cleaning, and just me being like not very, savvy. Yeah, I guess you would call it.
Hmm. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and
Now,
also
something else
hunting,
to
right?
consider.
It's
Yeah,
great for hunting.
absolutely. Yeah, it is good for hunting. And the other thing is that it probably raises a lot less suspicion. If you were walking in the woods with one in Canada versus walking in the woods with, I don't know, like, say something a little bit more combat related.
Yeah, an AK-47 with a banana clip.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Do they have those up there? I didn't even know if they did.
I mean, it was I shot one that my uncle had, but he was a
Hmm.
Yukoner, and it was an illegal gun, and that was a long time ago.
Oh, yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
so no, you're not allowed to have them. I'm pretty sure like that would be A, definitely a restricted weapon, and B, they would just totally, they'd pin the mag and they'd get rid of, they would make it somehow not even semi-auto because they're just,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. It's sad to see freedom trampled on so greatly. Um, and I think we had mentioned this before about how the U.S. doesn't want to have the U.K. style of gun control, and the U.K. doesn't want to have the Australian form of gun control, and Australia doesn't want to have the UK version of gun control, which is practically nothing.
yeah, it
And
just goes
somewhere in
straight
there,
down
the
the
New
line.
Zealanders, somewhere in there, the New Zealanders are finding out that it was probably a mistake to turn anything in. I do respect the Canadians in the fact that there was a very large um, failed participation rate in the registration of forbidden weapons, and I applaud them for that. Obviously, no one will ever actually come out and say that it was them, but what I will tell you is that that's a good sign, because the the more the more rebellious a population is to registration attempts, the greater the likelihood is that they will retain a greater amount of freedom than if they had given in.
Yeah, I remember when that long gun registry was out. That same uncle that I shot that AK, he had a bunch of unregistered long guns he wanted to give me, but
Hmm.
I was like 18 at the time, and
Yeah,
I just left home. I was living out of a vehicle. Like I couldn't take 9 long
yeah,
guns, but they
yeah,
were beautiful. I wish I knew enough about them to tell you like some specs, but like they were all,
yeah,
Yukon Moose Hunter uh
yeah.
long
And
guns.
if you and I had a time machine, and we could jump in that time machine tonight, and we could say, okay, Josh, what do you want to do with these things? I would probably give you a really good lesson on how to properly bury them, so that once you got old enough to the point where you realized how important and how valuable they would be in the future, you would at least have that level of access to them. But again, this is one of those things where we're just talking hypotheticals.
Hey,
But yeah,
I
I
would
don't.
appreciate that if I could have kept
Yeah,
those.
yeah, yeah. And I'm sorry I wasn't there to have that conversation. Because at the end of the day, it's, especially if they didn't know you had them. There's a myriad of places that you can put things. Um, I have a friend that has some ties to Canadians, where they suspected that a lot of them just ended up in the rafters of old barns.
Just nobody. It was a real gong show because once they put that stuff in, people with these weapons, they had almost no option other than to just turn them in to be destroyed. And Like,
That
I'm
that's
sure,
the lesson. That's the lesson that people need to realize is that registration always precedes confiscation.
yeah, I bet you most of the people that kept them were just like, no, I'm not. This is perfectly good. Why would I get this destroyed? That's,
Hmm.
you know, makes no sense. And besides, like those 3D printed gun people say, the argument is over. There
Yeah,
is there's no putting that back in the bag.
yeah, that's right. Yeah, I celebrate that as well. I think the people who are continuing to 3D print and bring the technology into probably what will maybe at some point be considered a little bit more of a standardized process, where there's a lot less risk to the user. To me, that right there is they're doing God's work as far as I'm concerned.
It is truly amazing watching it grow. Like from that first one where it just has the one handgun shot, and then now you see that video where it's all fully automatic. They've got automatic Glocks. They've got an AK-47. It's all
Yeah,
insanely intense.
yeah, yeah. There's hope um, in that regard, you know. But it starts with not giving in with what you have. You know, I wouldn't want to turn in what I own just to be starting from square one, all over again, trying to 3D print something because, I put some of my firearms through some rigorous range time, and the great part about a 3D gun is that yes, if you didn't have one now you have one, but if you're going to run 12,000 rounds a year through it, you probably want to have a lot of R&D going into that thing, because on the market, the amount of R&D that go into firearms is millions of dollars. Now, granted, some of that is because they're trying to avoid the lawsuit aspect, but there's a benefit in the fact that you're getting a reliable firearm at a probably a reduced price in the fact that it's because it's an industry, and it becomes an industry standard, that makes it a little bit more um, standardized in that regard. Like for instance, there's there's a SAMI specification for the amount of pressure that certain steels will be able to withstand uh, inside a chamber, based on the pressure that's given off from it when a round is fired. Those are standards, and the reason those standards became a standard was simply because some people blew their guns up, and and eventually they had to figure out how to not do that. And those types of standards are good. That's not regulation. That's called being smart.
Yeah, I
So
mean,
so so
if
I,
I
I
was making one of those
encourage.
3D printed guns, I'd be pulling the trigger with a string the first time.
Right, yeah. Yeah, and the thing is, just because it fires safely the first 10 times doesn't mean the 11th time isn't when the crack starts. And this is not to dispute the validity of 3D printed guns. More or less, it's just designed to encourage. My discussion here is just to encourage them to continue furthering, the level of standards that are going to be needed for these things to be safe. That would be true for engines that don't blow up, houses that don't fall in on people. We can make all of those things without government. We can. People do it. They've been doing it for years. But it's that process of figuring out, from a mechanical engineering standpoint and from an electrical engineering standpoint. I have done my own electrical work in the past, but I've had an electrician come back and look at it and say, yes, this is good, mainly because I like sleeping at night peaceably,
Yeah, yeah.
and knowing that my house isn't going to burn down because of I have one too many things plugged in, and I have too low of an amp fuse for the amount of output that's being drawn on it. Those types of things are just pretty simple and basic. And I think that they can be managed without regulation from a government standpoint and standardized more from an industry standpoint. UL Labs is a perfect example. Underwriter laboratories for how much watts a bulb will put off. Will this iron start a fire in the cord because it draws too many amps for the thickness of the cord? So just a perfect example of some of those things that can be accomplished without government. Probably reduce the price of things, because then you won't have somebody having to create all of those labels that state, warning, do not shower, while running the hair dryer,
Yeah,
and all those labels cost money.
yeah.
So
Do not eat on the light bulbs.
right, yeah, do not break up and throw on top of your salad as croutons.
Yeah. Don't rub this sand in your eyes.
The desiccant packets, do not eat. I love those.
I keep
I
all of
had a
those.
Marine.
I save all those desiccant
I had
packs.
a Marine that wanted to prove that you could eat them.
Oh no. I save all those packs. I keep them in my little seed container because then the seeds have no moisture or oxygen.
That's a good place to keep your ammo as well.
In with the desiccant packs.
Yeah, throw some desiccant packs in your ammo can, especially if you're in a humid or rainy area that gets a lot of rain. It's especially if it's hand loaded ammunition, because hand loaded ammunition, it's awesome, it's great, and I won't ever talk bad about hand loaded ammunition. But some of the hand loaded ammunition won't withstand some of the humidity that factory ammunition can, simply because they will have different sealants that will be in place when casings are made, when the primers are inserted into the casing, things like that. And so the benefits to factory ammunition is that it's a little bit more of shelf life.
Yeah.
Depending on the weather, of course. Now, one thing I like about Arizona is that we really only have monsoon season to contend with, and when that happens, about a month before monsoon, or a couple of weeks before monsoon, I will pull out the firearms, put a nice little light coat of oil, that type of thing, to prevent any type of rust. But for the most part, I've not had any problems with that. I've been in places in the past where in a week's time, you'd have a nice little layer of rust on something, and it was blued. And so, that a lot of that changes. If you go up to Alaska, you see a lot of hunters use stainless up there, simply because of the elements and how dangerous the elements are to the components of a firearm.
Stainless is definitely on my bucket list.
Yeah. So probably you want to look at a bolt gun next, I think.
Mm-hmm.
I think a bolt gun would be good because, again, it's something that doesn't raise the huge eyebrow. But I think you guys are limited as far as which calibers you can use, though. Am I right?
I know that we have certain limits on, literally the
Like military.
AR-15.
Yeah, well, like military calibers, can you use military calibers? Like if you had a 308 bolt gun, can you do that, or is that something that is looked at as, oh, that's a military caliber, you can't have that? How does that work?
I'm not sure if they regulate any calibers. I know that they're restricted weapons regulating. It's like it's very specifically by name. So they name a weapon and then
Hmm.
that weapon's limited. So like
Yeah, which is
for
silly.
it's so silly. And for instance,
Yeah.
like the AR-15, right? That's limited
Hmm.
out the nuts, but there's four or five different like, things that are almost identical, but they have a different name, like a
Hmm.
Chinese knockoff version or whatever.
Yeah. If I were a
Those
company and I
those aren't
were
on our
wanting,
list. And so you're
yeah.
allowed.
So if I were a company and they would do things by name, I would change the name of the firearm every single week, just by one letter or by one number or a combination of a lever and a number. And so you would literally run them to the point where they would just say, we don't care if it looks anything like this, you can't have it. But the point is, take your slavers and put them to task when it comes to them trying to take your freedoms. Make them work harder for it.
Make them work for it. I like that.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's been recent rumblings in our government up here about putting out that long gun registry again.
Hmm.
It's been out and retracted. It's a joke at this point. But Fancy Pants Trudeau wants to make that happen because he can't find other ways to waste our money.
Wow.
I don't know. It's crazy up here. Our laws are just wild. Like apparently we're allowed to have a sawed-off shotgun, and you're not.
Right. Yeah. They limited us to certain types of shotguns simply because they didn't like the shortened version. I think they were concerned that the shortened version was a little bit more oriented toward the criminal element,
That's so crazy,
which,
and somehow
yeah,
we can get away with it. It's a restricted weapon, and there's no barrel limit. It can be
yeah,
however short.
yeah,
So like
that is very bizarre.
that it's totally bizarre to me because my laws up here are so convoluted, whereas down there everybody it's like that's where the freedom to bear arms exists.
Yeah.
Um,
Now, I think we talked about this before. The Canada had. Do you have a Bill of Rights, Second Amendment?
I looked this up after we talked about it. It's called the Magna Carta up here. So
Oh,
yeah,
well, the Magna Carta was kind of an interesting document because it did talk about how there was a level of sovereignty in the individual.
yeah, it was one of the first sort of you know uh,
Hmm.
people sourced power
Yeah.
documents.
Another one was the Declaration of Arbroath. I don't know if you're familiar with that.
Arbroath.
Hmm. Yeah,
How
it was
how
written
would you
by
spell
the
that?
Scots. Arbroath. Arbroath. It was written by the Scots, and I want to say it was in the 1200s, and it basically said that we have the right to rule ourselves, and if you don't recognize that right, um, it's going to be unfortunate for you because until the last 100 of us are alive, you're going to have to contend with us. And that is actually why my family was thrown out of Scotland, because we were border reavers. And what that meant was that we participated in all the stealing of the sheep games. So we were pretty decent on a horse, on horseback. And it meant that we were probably at the time one of the finest light cavalry units that there was on the face of the earth. And every time the British sent their soldiers up north to quell something, a lot of them disappeared because they were killed. And I think it was James the First got tired of that.
Yeah, Scotland versus England is one of those amazing
Hmm.
old stories that people don't tell
Yeah.
enough, you know?
Yeah, the Border Reavers. We were the Border Reavers. I like
That
the name.
that is a
I
wicked name.
yeah, I don't like the fact that it was because we uh we we pillaged each other. But I mean, where else are you going to get practice pillaging if you don't pillage each other?
Yeah, it's kind of like the Vikings, but way later.
Yeah, yeah,
The last
yeah.
kick of the Vikings.
Well, because there is a pretty good connection between the Vikings and the Scots, just simply because the Vikings came down and like to spread their seed quite a
A
bit
hundred
into
percent.
Scotland. Yeah,
That's the reason I look the way I do, being Irish.
right. Yeah,
If
yeah,
this isn't because some, Norwegian dude came to Ireland and left a bunch of children behind, then I don't know what it's from.
right. That was exactly it.
I wish I had information like that. You've got cool information. You know where your family came from. A couple steps back down my line, there's a bunch of adoptions and like the paperwork goes all murky. So it's impossible to say where they were back in the day.
Hmm. Yeah. Well, you can always pick whatever tradition you want, and then you just adopt it and carry it from there on out. As you create your next generation of persons, um, which I think is something that's important. That's something that gets missed and left out in the world of libertarianism. Is that, I mean, it is important that we proselytize to a degree, to where we try to teach people to become less dependent and less subservient to the state. But at the same time, um, when you're gone, and you don't really leave anything um, to take your place other than the people that you've reached out to. But eventually they'll be gone too. And so, having progeny to carry on your tradition and your belief system, I think is something that's important, and that gets missed a lot, gets left out. I'm not talking about creating a master race or anything stupid like that. I'm literally just talking about, from an ideological standpoint, it dies when you die.
Yeah, your family is like it's a growth of you, like it's
Hmm.
individualized.
Yeah.
It's its
And the
own
goal
little
of
culture.
communism is to destroy that handover in property, especially, and wealth. They don't want that property and that wealth handed over. From a legal standpoint, here in the U.S., and I don't know if you have um, anything, but we have things like living trusts, which are basically like a legal mechanism that is designed to keep the state from taking your property and having a court decide who gets what and how much money they have to pay in order to get it, in taxes and different things like that. So I don't know if Canada has that, but I know here we have trusts, and um, in the U.S. they have a firearms trust. They highly recommend a firearms trust for anyone who has, say, for instance, like class two type of firearms, which would be things that are regulated by the NFA, 1934. Things like the short barreled shotgun, or full auto weapons that you've had to go through this painstaking process. So the trust is a way to prevent that from being taken, and it's a way for it to be, basically moved on to your living progeny after you pass away.
It's like insurance that it gets into your will.
Yeah, it is a sense. It in a sense it is a will, but a trust is essentially treated like a person, and then the people who you list on your trust are. I know I'm going to have a legal expert say, you got that wrong.
Oh,
Um, uh, Essentially, the trust is the person. It becomes a almost like a corporation, right?
yeah,
Becomes
yeah,
a person, right? And what it does is it's able to ensure that your wishes are followed, and all of those instructions are provided within the trust, so that when if something were to happen to you, or like for instance, if something were to happen to me and my wife, you know, there's two other people that have a combination to my safe, and they also know where my where the different pieces of property that are listed in my trust, so that they can be basically handed over to my children, instead of the state coming in and deciding, oh yeah, no, we wanted one of these, thank you.
yeah. They swoop in like vultures if you don't have everything tied together.
Yeah. Hmm.
And even if you do,
Yeah.
they're probably still going to take a significant portion.
Well, and that was the purpose of the death tax, in fact, and that was very much a communist effort, because they thought that that would be the perfect way to prevent um, wealth from being passed on, property and different things like that to be passed on to the next generation. Because remember, that's one of the 10 planks of the Communist Manifesto, is to prevent that transfer of wealth and property, because it needs to be redistributed to everyone else. See, because if you accumulate wealth, and then maybe you've figured out how to break the code, then it's unfair that you pass that wealth on to your offspring, and that it belongs to everybody else, because collectivism reasons. It's a pretty onerous belief system, if you think about it, because in an effort to remain fair, you still have people like George Soros, and you look at the things that he funds, and you think to yourself, like, how is that you know um, how is that healthy? All the people that are revolting and basically destroying property, and he's giving them money to do that. It's pretty disgusting. And then somehow that's not a crime, for him to fund those efforts. you know
That's uh that's above my head, you know. That's the Lord's playing 4D chess while I'm mucking around
yeah.
in the dirt.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, every now and then I get quasi intellectual, and then I scare myself, so I better get back down into the weeds.
It is a fantastic time to be, I am assuming, to be Skip, and it's definitely a good time to be me. Like within my own family, people that have always thought I was a crazy preparing for the apocalypse type. Now they their eyebrows are raised and they're saying, "So what should we do next?"
Hmm. Yeah. It's kind of scary, because that's a lot of responsibility. I didn't want to be responsible for other people. I just wanted to be responsible for myself. And then I've got dozens of people coming to me and saying, "Hey, what should I buy?" And that's kind of scary, because I mean, yes, I'm glad that they recognize that they're that they're probably a little late listening to me, or listening to what I had to say when we had those conversations. But at the same time, it's like, well, what if I get it wrong? What if I give them the wrong information, and they end up, especially when people ask me, well, should I buy gold? Should I get out of my 401k? those are very scary conversations to have with someone. And what I tell people, and you're never wrong in this, is real diversification isn't just within a 401k. Real diversification is everything else, that if that 401k fails, you're not going to be penniless. That's what diversification is. And the wealthiest people in the world know this. They're diversified across every medium, to include Bitcoin. And so they say, okay, well, you know what? There's too many of these other people that are in Bitcoin. Let's shake it up a little. And a bunch of people jump out of Bitcoin, and then they'll buy it up again, and they'll be like, okay, well, we got rid of them. So it's kind of, they're an evil bunch. Yeah, that's for sure.
The BE pigs. How do you
Oh yeah.
pronounce that? The bee pigs?
I just call them the bee pigs. Yeah, it's just a term I made up. It's not anything real, but the fact is that there's enough evidence. I've seen enough evidence to believe that it is such a thing. It is a real thing, and I think that there are people that have a dangerous amount of control and power over others. I just realized I just figured something out here. This is kind of cool. There's an AR 22 conversion that goes inside an AR. And the
Right.
one I have is made by Cener, Ceiner, Cener. Anyway, I had never been able to figure out how to take it apart, and I was sitting here messing with it while I was talking to you, and amazingly, I managed to get it apart without breaking it. I could have read the instructions, but that would have been
That's cheating.
that wouldn't have been as fun.
An
So
AR-22 conversion. Hey.
yeah, you take out the bolt carrier group of a standard AR, 5.56 AR,
Yeah.
and then what you do is you slide this in its place. You use a different magazine, of course, and it has a spot where it looks almost like a 5.56 casing on the front end. And so what that does is that goes in and engages the chamber, so that when the 22 is fired from the new chamber, which is supported but is a little bit further back, it enables the 22 round to travel down the barrel. It operates on a recoil operation instead of gas. But what they say is that after you use it, like say you shoot 100 rounds or something like that, or whatever, you want to get some practice in, you want to teach the little kids how to shoot an AR or something, then what you do is you put in some regular 5.56 rounds in the standard bolt carrier group and fire it, and it clears out the gas system and cleans it, so that you don't have any leading or anything like that make its way into the gas system. So it's a pretty neat system, and it does make an AR a pretty effective 22 rifle. So I got it simply because I use it for people who are unfamiliar with AR platforms, and I have them shoot something that's a little less scary, if you will. And in that process, they get used to it. They like it. They start to get the feel for how the rifle fits, and then you can always upgrade them. I did that with my kids. My kids all learned how to shoot their ARs with a 22. This exact same one, bolt conversion. And then as they got older, I would stop putting the 22 bolt conversion in there and just start moving them up to the 5.56.
Is there just a little bit less recoil or something in the 22?
Oh yeah, significantly less recoil. Yeah, not that a 5.56 kicks that much. It's just part of it is it's just a lot quieter,
Yeah.
and because 22 is quieter, it makes people jolt just a little less, and maybe they're not quite as afraid of it when they're little. And you never want to get to the point where they they don't have a healthy respect for it. But you also don't want people afraid of guns, because when they're afraid of guns, they seem to think that their actions um, aren't the cause of something because it's the gun that did it. And so you want to try to dispel that, get them out of that frame of reference. There's a difference between having a healthy respect for a firearm and being afraid of it.
Yeah. Yeah, you don't want to just live in fear. You
Yeah.
It's like that would be like being afraid of your kitchen knife,
Right. Yeah.
Anything can do something bad if you misuse it.
And the truth is, if you've ever seen someone who's never really handled a kitchen knife all that well, the more afraid of something you are, the more likely you are harm to yourself or others with it.
Yeah. And they say that a dull knife cuts more.
Yes. Yes. My
So,
father raised me that way. And it was funny because when I was in the army, I would say things like that and people would look at me weird, like they'd never heard that before. And I thought, well, that's kind of odd. My old man said that all the time. And they would look at it like, well, what do you mean a dull knife never cut anybody? And what it was is it was just the idea was that people always think that a dull knife is safe, but if you use a dull knife casually, and then you pick up a sharp knife, you've now cut yourself because of that dull knife. That dull knife taught you bad habits. So it
yeah.
made sense to me.
Yeah, it's always made sense to me, It's like
Yeah.
if you got a sharp knife, you're careful with it, it does what you want, but if it's dull, you're just trying to brute force it. Shit goes wrong, it slips into your finger.
Yeah. Now, I'm assuming that your blacksmithing is still going along. You're still doing good with your blacksmithing?
It's been kind of on pause because I've been building this chicken coop, Skip. Have you seen any
Yeah.
pictures of that?
I have not, but I'm going to go in and look at them
It's
after we're
been
done with the
uh,
podcast.
it's been a whole big thing. I basically in this quarantine lockdown,
Mm-hmm.
we I my aunt and my mom decided to go halvesies on a chicken coop because my aunt wants these
Good.
chickens, and
Good.
so they contracted me to build it, and we went out in quarantine land. We got all the supplies, and then I built this giant chicken coop, which is way bigger than it needs to be. Um, and it's
Well,
like
you're leaving room to grow, though, right?
absolutely, it
Yeah.
could probably hold, I think probably like 14, maybe 10 to 14 chickens.
That's a lot of chickens if you're considering them being layers.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, that's good.
Right now it's supposed to have four in it,
Hmm.
but I think we have six. Not that I
Yeah.
should not that I should be blasting that out on the internet.
Right. Right. We don't want people showing up for chickens or eggs.
Or just to check on our little bylaw compliance or whatever.
Oh, yeah. I forgot about that. So I guess the whole snitches get stitches, is that just an American thing and you don't have that in Canada?
No, up here snitches get the ditch.
That's funny. Well, unfortunately, I think that there are people who will see that enticement of and of course, it's always an appeal at authority, always. The belief that that the government knows best, and that the reason why they have these rules in is because you could get yourself hurt with a chicken,
I
and
uh, I don't understand honestly what their whole angle is behind keeping
well,
us from having a chicken.
that's
Like
their justification. Their justification is that people could get hurt, or they could possibly catch a disease without this knowledge that only the state can handle, right? And then in the process of all of this, what you end up with is you end up with this belief that somehow that you can't do that without permission. But the silly part of the whole thing is that the state uses it as a method of control over people, A, and B, it's a great way to make money.
yeah. I wonder if it's mostly about the money or if it's mostly them just trying to Yeah, I don't know. I Part of me thinks it's the money all the time.
Yeah. Yeah, it'd be hard pressed to tell, but remember, if we don't need them, then why do we have them, right? And so we have to maintain this sense that somehow the state's necessary, and they are the ones that make these decisions. So you just, Josh, you just can't question these things. It doesn't. And I'm sure you've probably had a conversation with someone who's been like that, and you ask them the hard questions, and then they can't answer, and then they have to say things like, "Well, because that's just how it is. That's just how it is." That's
Especially
how.
in these times, in this
Yeah,
COVID-19 times,
yeah.
it's now is the time when you watch the government struggle to make people think that they're doing something. Like
Hmm.
isn't Trump putting out a press release like every day or something?
Yeah, excuse me. No, that's not COVID. Yeah, I think so. I think that they're doing some kind of. Well, it doesn't matter what he says. He's going to have people that say he's doing a terrible job. He's going to have people saying he's doing a good job. If he says enough, if he says too much, it doesn't matter. Someone is always going to be unhappy, because whether it's a president of a country or the president of the high school reunion, someone is always going to have something to bitch about, and somebody is always going to have a a desire to rule others. Those two things are always going to be the case. And the thing is if people looked at it a little bit differently and thought, you know, maybe we just be responsible for ourselves. And if I screw up and I die, I have nobody to blame but myself. I can't. My family can't say, well, why didn't you do something to stop them? We're now going to hold you liable. That's where a lot of this comes from, unfortunately.
The
You know,
safety sticker generation.
yeah, yeah. The lawsuit generation, frivolous lawsuits. I think everything changed right around the time that a lady bought coffee at McDonald's,
Yeah. Coffee.
and she was at the drive-through and she put it between her legs, and I think she was driving stick. And how you hold a styrofoam cup of coffee between your legs is beyond me. Maybe she was really talented, don't know. But at the end of the day, when she closed her legs, the coffee shot up and went all over her lap, and of course it burned her really, really serious. And that was McDonald's fault somehow. Like that, I don't know what ethical and moral gymnastics was required to make that McDonald's fault, but they managed to do it in a court, and a judge and a jury decided it, and it's been a downhill travel ever since.
I was gonna say that I think that might be like an American thing because, you know, I don't really see very many lawsuit happy sort of situations up here. But then again, we have that caution coffee is hot label. Um, so
Well,
maybe I'm completely wrong.
that might be an industry standard in response to that, just in a desire to alleviate any future intended litigations.
Yeah, just to get that one out of the way before
Yeah,
anybody even tries.
yeah, that's what I'm thinking.
It's it's totally crazy.
It's a brave new world.
Yeah, COVID 1984.
Yeah. So, I am kind of interested to see, what some of the rumors that I've heard is that, there's some investigations going on, and that there's some people that are going to be brought to justice for some of the crimes. And I'm talking like bee pigs related crimes. I still remain skeptical, but I really want it to be true, just simply because I think that it's time for them to go away. We
Yeah.
don't need people like that living off of us and calling us like we're animals that aren't needed anymore.
Not even animals they like, like
Yeah.
just rats. And then
Hmm.
they grab us by the scruff of the neck and then throw us back in our box,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah. So I mean, I personally would like to see them go away. I think it's a pretty disgusting, the way the plantation is set up. I think that people have value, individuals have value, and they do not, obviously they do not believe that. They treat people like we're chattel. And me personally, I think it's about time that the human race figure out how to get rid of them.
It seems like we might be making some serious steps in like just this month alone. Like I've seen people that have avoided computers and the internet. I've seen them
Hmm.
dive headlong into like video conferencing and all of this futuristic shit that they had nothing to do with before this. And now they love it, They're like, "Oh, why were we not using this?"
Hmm. Yeah. Well, that's true. That's true, and that would be great if that happened. I would like to see, the arrest of, people like Hillary Clinton and the Bushes for their part in what occurred somewhere between the Benghazi, uh, you know, uh, occurrences, Uranium One, um, perhaps 9/11. I think there's a lot of bad things that they have benefited from, and that's not even including the whole, child pedophile rings and stuff like that. That
The
some people
real
will agree
fucked
with
up
me
evil, evil shit.
are actually. I mean, there are people who agree with me. I'm not the only one that's saying this. There are people out there that have seen enough evidence to have made their own decision about whether what I'm saying is bullshit or not. Um, I've done my research. I encourage people to do their own research. Don't just take my word for it. Look into it. And don't do a Google search and say, well, the first page says it's debunked, so it must not be true, because, you know, Google's probably in on it.
Yeah. Snopes says it's not true, so it must be.
Right. And for the longest time, I don't know if you knew this or not. Apologize for the background noise.
No, it's
Um,
fine. It's good color.
so yeah. So there's when Snopes first started out, it was literally a husband and a wife that were running the website, and then I guess they've expanded now, but no one ever bothered to find out, what their apolitical background was. They were huge lefties, big time, and nobody thought that was odd. And so, that whole, well, I checked it on Snopes and it's not true. And it took forever to try to point out to people that, you know, some people just have an agenda and they use that information to maintain the status quo and amount of control that people will allow themselves to be controlled with. And that very well could be just one of those controls. If you control information, you can control people, just like you control food.
I got a question for you.
Yeah.
If they put in a mandatory like "don't leave your house" call, would you tell them to go fuck themselves, or would you already be doing it? And then, I mean, like, obviously, I assume you'd already be doing it, and then when they make it a law, it's like it doesn't affect you. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it wouldn't affect me because I don't really need to leave my house. I have comms with all my neighbors. We have, you know, quad band, ham radios, and multiple forms of communication that if they knock the cell phone, turn the cell phones off, or the cell phone networks were to be knocked down. I mean, we have multiple methods of being able to communicate with each other. And besides, I can just walk out in my backyard and talk over the wall to them. If something, if all the radios weren't working, or I didn't want it aired over the
Yeah,
band.
the
So
frequencies.
yeah, so I don't know. I mean, would I run out there just out of civil disobedience if they told me that I couldn't leave my house? Why? Like, what would there be to gain from that? I
Yeah.
don't. I guess I don't think that way. If somebody says, don't do this or you'll get arrested, I don't run out and do that just so that I can spend the night in jail. I have other things that I can be doing. I'm a husband. I'm a father. I have responsibilities. So no, I would not just run out and go get arrested for the sake of being arrested for civil disobedience because they told me I couldn't leave my house. If they told me I couldn't leave my house, I'd be like, well, cool. I guess some people are going to wish that they had more food than I do or less food, or more food than they do because I'm good. I'm not going to need to get anything for quite some time.
I remember I saw a meme you posted. It made me laugh. It was most of the times Americans just want to sit at home and watch Netflix and chill. And then as soon as the government tells them they have to stay at home and watch Netflix and chill, everybody's like, "It's my God-given right to go out and lick anything I want."
Yes. Yes. I thought that was funny. It kind of shows a little bit of the rebellious nature of the Americans. We were born out of rebellion. That's something to remember. And I applaud that. I mean, of course the meme is funny because it's true. There's
100%.
there's truth to it. And so, it's not that the rebellion is bad. It's just that, I personally I wouldn't need to leave my home anyway. I have what I need here. My plan was to bug in, and there's really no need to change that. I have some adjustments I have to make. I've got to go get my daughter and bring her home because if this goes longer than what people even thought, which I think it probably is going to end up going longer.
Me too.
What's going to happen? Of course, they're going to have to adjust. I mean, they're already letting people go get food. You can't starve people, right? At least we hope they can't.
Well,
And so
until they run out of food.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And that's a whole different other problem. Yeah, that's a whole different problem. Probably not going to get into that today, but
No.
there is a potential for a shortage of food in the long term, and especially
I was saying
if
I was saying it last year, even before all this COVID stuff, because last year we
Yeah.
had such a shitty harvest most of
Yeah.
the world.
Yeah, it was. We're going on 3 years of bad harvests, I think. At least here in the U.S., it's not been the best, and so I mean there is a potential for things to get much worse. I think that anybody that takes a desire to be self-sufficient is going to probably fare better than people who think the government's there to to fill their freezer. And I guess I just don't really spend a whole lot of time with people that believe that way. I don't understand what their thought process is. I really can't relate to them, quite frankly. I mean, it's like going to a cocktail party. The groups of people that I run into a standard American cocktail party are not the people I'm really interested in talking to anyway.
It's it would be quite the thing to see if we got a cocktail party full of, anarchist Twitter.
Well, I do find them. I actually do find them. But most times it's usually either at my home with my friends, or it's with Zero Gov and some of his friends. Those are usually pretty entertaining conversations, but they are few and far between. I'm sure that everybody, to a degree, has people that they get together with that actually believe in freedom and individualism first and foremost before the collective. And when you're around people like that, it's very refreshing, instead of listening to people talk about how much of the state they can fit into the back of their throat.
Well put.
Yeah. So I mean, if you put it in that perspective, then to me, the two finest people groups of people you can talk to are A, people who are self-sufficient, and B, people who have a love and thirst for freedom and everything that entails. And those are the only people that you'll actually see me ever be around or even be interested in talking to, which is part of the reason why I just kind of get rid of the detritus that I run into on Twitter quite often. I just mute them because they're really, I don't mean to sound supremacist in any way of my own opinions or abilities, but to a degree, they're just not worth my time. They're just not. And I've learned that over time. Zero Gov, actually, Bill Buper, he's spent a lot of time kind of helping me through some of these challenges and seeing me go on and on and on with somebody who is obviously a state supremacist, and then at some point just say, look, you're not, you can't tilt at every windmill. You just can't. You don't have enough time and you don't have enough energy. You can do what you can, but only save the people who actually want to be saved.
Yeah.
So that's kind of my my approach on things is I'd rather help people that are looking for help, quite frankly. And right now there's no shortage of people looking for help.
No.
My DMs blow up on a daily basis right now with just people looking for, what kind of body armor should I get, or what plate carrier, and that was today. There's some other questions that I get. I mean, even family members that are like, okay, I'm taking what you said serious from last year.
Yeah.
And I'm glad. I mean, I'm not laughing at them. I'm kind of laughing because, look at how much more I could have helped them if they would have started listening to me a year ago. But I mean, at the same point, I'm just glad that they're listening. So
it's definitely a privileged position to be in these days, sitting here with a couple months worth of supply for toilet paper and all the staples that we bought in the middle of February before anybody was even panicking.
Yeah. Well, and for me, I didn't really run out and buy a whole bunch of stuff in February because I just keep general, I have a rotation that I live off of. It's very, I guess you could say it's very Mormon-esque, but I'm not Mormon. But I have this, this belief in just having extra, but the people who kind of complicated the problem and made things a lot worse were the people who just immediately ran out and filled their shopping carts with toilet paper because they saw somebody else doing it. Now, if you were to ask them, well, why toilet paper? I mean, what is toilet paper in value over anything else that you are probably not having enough of at home? They couldn't really answer that question simply because they were doing things out of a panic rather than doing things out of a logical, discussion. There was no logic based on this. That this was a reaction or overreaction that occurred. And I just want your viewers to know I was not the person in February that had 20 cases of toilet paper in my shopping cart because I foresaw this. I just always have 2 or 3 cases of toilet paper. And then as the year goes on, I might add another one from Costco. And then, I'm good. I won't need toilet paper for 6 months. And that's not really a big deal. And it's, I'm not buying 9 cases at a time. And quite frankly, when people do that, that's what really puts the system in such a shock because it can't respond quick enough. So quite frankly, a lot of the problems are brought on by people who waited to the last minute,
Yeah.
not people who stocked up, but the people who didn't have at least the bare minimum to get them by for 3 weeks or 4 weeks or 6 weeks.
A
I
friend,
can
a friend
understand
of,
a lot of people not having 6 weeks, but I mean, there are people that shop every day for what they need the next day.
which is
To me,
insane.
yeah, that's insane. That's just stupid.
A friend of mine was talking about it, and they used a really interesting analogy. Like, you know how the classic zombie, uh, like the zombie story where it's they're running around looking for brains.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
He was just saying that the people that you see at the store now, where they're panicking and trying to buy toilet paper and there is none, those are the zombies. And in a couple of weeks, when they have, their shortages are running out, those will be the ones going around looking for brain. And the
Yeah.
brain is anybody that prepared.
Yeah. Yeah. And the one thing I do want to say, and I definitely pass judgment on people like this that say, well, I don't need to prepare. All I need to know where the people are that prepare.
Yeah.
And I've heard that before. And the only thing I can say about that is that, if you think that someone spent enough time thinking that they needed these things in advance and they put them back, I'm not sure what makes you think that they didn't also plan on the fact that people like you would be coming. And so for people who say, well, I don't need to know where all the guns are, or, I don't need a whole bunch of guns. I just need to know where some people live that have them. You know, I, you know, you're going to learn.
Yeah, you'll learn quick.
Yeah.
Um, it seems kind of like almost fortunate that your son and your daughter are coming back home, because then, uh, you kind of have like a crew.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I've trained them. I mean, they have, my kids have spent a lot of time on a range. And when I say a lot of time, there's not too many kids that are asked to shoot, SWAT pistol standard qualifications at a gun club, by the SWAT team. And when that happens, what that tells me is that, they've been observed and seen as safe, and all the things that I really wanted them to be able to demonstrate safely, to where they will actually be able to perform at a level that is at least equal to, but hopefully above, whatever adversary they may end up having. And to me, that's what it's all about right there. You don't have to be the best. You just have to be better than the person that's shooting against you.
Interesting take.
Yeah. I mean, because you can never be the best. There's always somebody better.
Hmm.
But you should always be training like someone else out there is also training to engage you. And that's the way I look at it with my kids. I really wanted them to be safe, and I wanted them to be competent. And quite frankly, I really just wanted to encourage them to be someone that other people would say, you actually handle yourself really well with that. We we're encouraged to see someone your age, this safe with a firearm. And I mean, it didn't matter how often I would take my kids to either a gun show or to a gun store or something like that. And the way the laws are written, they have to hand the gun to the parent, and then the parent can show the child a firearm. And when they would observe the way my kids would inspect the chamber, ensure that it's not loaded, and then be aware of its muzzle. Gun stores are a terrible place to learn muzzle awareness. I'm hoping that it's gotten better, but I know that when my kids were younger, they would actually point at other people at the store and be like, "Look at what he's doing over there," and I would tell them, I'd be like, "Look, don't point. Just take a mental note and just say, I don't want to ever be that stupid." And that's kind of what I wanted my kids to take as a lesson from the circumstances that they were seeing. And so now, I mean, I seriously, I have people that are like, "Hey, I would appreciate your kid backing me up anytime." And to me, that's a really, really encouraging thing to hear.
100%. And
Yeah.
you have those two for backup in that, and also just like, if a tree falls down, you got two people to help you bucket and all that, right?
Yeah. So I mean, it's good. My kids can handle themselves. At 19, their biggest challenge is adulting. It's not the safe handling of firearms or the ability to run a bill drill or run the VTAC 222 drill. Their challenges are more like adulting.
Surviving 2020.
Yeah. Well, I mean, just basic adulting, because that's challenging at 19. Just not procrastinating the things that are going to cost you money later.
Yeah.
Not paying a bill and getting a late notice that charges you a whole bunch more money. I mean, those are all fairly basic lessons that you learn in adulting, but it's a process getting there. And
putting your laundry away when you do it instead of just leaving it in the laundry basket.
Yes, or having a room that doesn't smell like shit.
Yeah.
That would be nice. I'd like that. I know my wife would appreciate that.
Yeah, it's that was definitely something that it just clicked for me one day.
Yeah, it happens. It does. It happens. And like, I'm kind of hard on my kids. I know it's probably hard to believe, but I'm kind of hard on my kids. But really, they're great kids. They really are, and I'm really lucky to have them. And I think that there's going to be a day when they're going to look back and they're going to realize, oh, so this is why he was so hard on us. It wasn't all that other stuff. It was because of this. And, it's really just because I want them to strive to be better, and I'm not done being better. I'm still not done. You've seen some of the pictures and the projects and things like that I do, but I don't do that because my wife is whipping me in the background. It's just simply because I want to accomplish more. There's more things I want to do. We're only here on the earth for so long, and there's a lot of things I want to do. I'm driven.
Yeah, it's good. You got to make progress every day, right?
Yeah.
Something.
Yeah. So, that's if I encourage people along the way, to me, that's all the better. To help other folks. To me, one of the things that I learned early on in my military career is go talk to the guys that are older than you, have a little bit more experience, and learn what they learn from their mistakes. Have them tell you what they tried and how it didn't work. and then say, I wonder how I can do this without making the same mistakes they made. Now, you may make your own mistakes, and that's completely understandable. But, you know, it's nice to be able to have that knowledge of, okay, well, they tried this and this didn't work. This is not a good plan. And I kind of learned from them that way. And I think that if people do that, they're going to make their lives a lot easier.
Yeah, rather than repeat the hard lessons.
Yeah. You know, because look, I'm not a video game person, but the one thing that I can tell you is that if you watch somebody else go through, like, say there's 12 different
Level.
stages
Yeah.
or levels. Yeah. If you watch somebody else go through those 12 levels and you see the mistakes and you say, oh, okay, well, I don't want to do that. I know that didn't work. That's nothing different. You know, that is how you learn to play the game better, more effective. And quite frankly, guess what? You don't have, you know, all summer to get through this game. You only have a lifetime, and if you waste it, you know, screwing up, then that's it. The game's over, and you're done. And so, you know, it's, to me, it's more about what you can learn from it and what you can bring to the table for other people, you know, because I do take on a Immanuel Kant's deontological ethics, which is I try to live my life the way, you know, as if it should be a model to other people. And so if you look at it from that perspective and you say, okay, so, you know, it's not something I can do, but no one else can do. You know, you can't be a hypocrite like that. And so, you know, I try to live my life that way and try to encourage other people to be the best that they can be. And somewhere along there, if a whole bunch of people do that, you're going to end up with a better world.
I didn't know that was Kant. That's
Yeah, deontological ethics. There was numerous philosophers that developed that, but Immanuel Kant was the one that really sticks out in my head because I did a study on individualism, and Kant was probably one of the strongest proponents for individualism. And to me, as an anarchist, as a libertarian, as a collapsitarian, there's nothing more important than the individual. You know, the individual is the sovereign. And so if you're going to have any rights, they have to be rooted in the individual. They can't be group or collective rights. Collective rights don't exist. The only rights that you have are the individual. And if everybody's working together, you have a group of individuals that are working as a team. Now that is a good thing, you know? And I think that's kind of where the whole, you know, if a man doesn't work, he doesn't eat, came from with John Smith. Was it John Smith? Yeah.
right. Yeah, and
With
when
the Pilgrims. Yeah.
the
With the Pilgrims.
free market, the free hand, and all
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
Um,
Adam Smith was the unseen hand, but I think it was John Smith that when they were coming here and getting off the boat, the one thing he couldn't have is a bunch of people sitting around waiting for the meal ticket. I don't know if you've ever been camping and been the only person that knew how to set up a tent, start a fire,
100%
and,
know
you know,
exactly what you're
prepare.
talking about. It's so
So
frustrating.
how terrible is that? And eventually you just pull somebody aside and, hey, let me show you how to do this so that I can do something else so that we're not eating at midnight. You know, we would like to eat at a normal hour so that, you know, we can be ready for tomorrow. And yeah, so that's kind of what I'm getting at, is that, you know, when you have a bunch of people that know what they're doing and what they're about, but the only way you can do that is when everybody, you know, works better to, you know, make themselves better. And that's my goal with my neighbors, even, you know, is like a positive reinforcement. and, you try to, hey, this is how I'm doing this. Cause I had people come up and they're like, how do you know how to do that? Well, I tried it 10 different ways wrong and figured out which way worked. And now that's the way I do it every time. But it took effort. But you'll never learn that if all you do is sit and watch sports all day. And that's literally what I would say. And they would take that and they'd be like, oh, okay, I see what you're saying.
And then they go back and watch sports all day.
They go right back and watch sports. And then one day they would want to know how to do something, and they would know that I'm not watching sports. They would already know. Be like, oh, well, I know he's not working or he's not watching sports, so he'll probably help me. And, I formed relationships and friendships with my neighbors that way. And some of them still watch sports. That's fine. I don't care, what they want to do in their time. I just know that it's not what I want to do with my time. I think that there's a lot more things that I can learn and a lot more things that I can get better at. And so that's what I spend my time doing.
I'm pretty stoked to have these chickens, because that's a whole new ball game for me to learn, how to keep chickens and all that. It's
I'm excited for you because, I grew up with chickens, and my in-laws had chickens, and we have neighbors that have chickens. And so it's a really neat thing. In fact, I helped somebody with building a firearm, and they were like, well, we don't really. I said, well, hey, you can't pay me. Don't pay me. What? Just you do what you feel like you've got. What's on your heart. You need any help with anything, just come by and let me know what you need help with. And if you feel like you have to do something because, it's like, well, you helped me out, so now I need to do something, then do. And if you don't, that's okay too. It doesn't mean I won't help you again. And so, we have that kind of a relationship. And I just mentioned it to him. He was like, well, can I give you money? And I was like, no, can't give me money. Don't worry about that. I was like, at some point, I'll need something and I'll give you a call. And it's kind of funny because he came back about 2 hours later and he had 4 dozen eggs. And we were like, oh, that's actually cool, because we hadn't gone and gotten eggs yet today. So that worked out well.
That's awesome. We've got 6 upstairs. Got to start using them. We're to have an overload.
So that you don't have to refrigerate eggs.
Yeah, no, the farm fresh ones you don't need to put in the fridge.
Yeah, as long as you don't wash the film on the outside of the eggs off, then they can pretty much. I don't want to say they're indefinite, but they'll last you a good long time. You'll be hungry before those eggs will go bad.
It's real exciting. Because it's going to be part of, like a market table thing where I'll have things to sell, and now I'll have a little section with eggs, farm eggs.
Well, and you can set it up as a barter, and then you're not going to have any of those tax type issues like you were talking about before. If you set things up as a barter, you could. Yep. So this is really nice and clean. I just finished putting together and cleaning up my Mark 18. It's one of 2 ARs that I'll be shooting this weekend in the course that I'm going to be taking. And ironically, the course that I'm taking is actually going to be deemed as mission essential, because some of the guys that are in the course are the local SWAT. And so they're like, nope, this course is mission essential. Well, I guess I get to benefit from that. So I'll be good. I'll be happy about that. We just have to social distance.
I remember you were talking about preparing for this course back when we were talking before.
Yeah, I've spent 6 months preparing for this course. So I'm actually very encouraged that they're not canceling it. How the instructor is making it from Florida is beyond me. It amazes me. The only thing I can think of is maybe he has a private pilot's license or something, and he's just going to fly here, because Arizona and Florida are pretty far away from each other.
Are the states on lockdown where like you can't travel between them now?
Well, currently there's a problem between Texas and Louisiana, the last that I heard this morning. And that will be an interesting discussion. And, you know, when you're a retired Delta Force operator, I don't know how you identify yourself to somebody that says, no, you can't drive across the state line. I don't know. Like, is there a special little handshake or a little badge you flip? Or is it just, hey, dude, I'm going to teach a class to a SWAT team, and you can't keep me from getting there because it's deemed as mission essential to, you know, the governor
Yeah.
the governor of the state I'm going to. Because
I have a
actually
hall pass. I swear I'm allowed to be here.
well, that's what's funny. Our governor said that ranges are deemed mission essential.
So they're not shutting down the range.
No, they're not shutting down the ranges or the classes or anything. And, you know, I look at that and I'm like, well, you know what? Maybe people will take a hint and get out there and start training. But if they don't have ammo, they can't train. So this, you know, hopefully people take this as a really good lessons learned, and take note that they should probably have a nice little stock of ammo, because they shouldn't be running out and buying it when everybody else is trying to buy it. That's the last time you want to buy ammo.
100%.
When there's a run on anything, that's when you should be sitting back and saying, man, I'm really glad I bought that 5 years ago or 3 years ago. So I try to maintain a certain round count all the time. And then as I know that something's going to come up that I'm going to need a higher round count, like this course I'm shooting is 2,000 rounds in 2 days. That's a lot of trigger time. And so, you know, I started getting that beforehand. And then, of course, all the train up that we've been doing over the last 6 months, I've probably burned through 3,000 or 4,000 rounds just in the last 6 months, just preparing for this, not to mention all the dry fire practice that I've been doing. Because who wants to get out there in front of a Delta operator and look all backwards and stupid? You know, and if you're paying good money for a good training course, you don't just wait until the day of the course and then show up and have them point out all the things that you're doing wrong. You do a lot of homework and you figure out how many things you can correct long before you get there, so that you can be at your absolute best, so he can make you even better, instead of you going there half-assed and getting there and then somehow leaving at a much lower level. To me, I look at it as getting the best bang for my buck.
Absolutely.
And that is getting as much dry fire practice in and as much training as I can, so that I can leave that course with a genuine level of confidence that I'm probably a decent shooter.
I got a question for you.
But for me, that's what it takes. I have to do stuff like that to have that opinion of myself.
You were talking earlier about loading your own ammunition.
Yeah.
Is that something you can do with 12 gauge? Because it's you know, weird. There's no brass. Like, you just get that little plastic thing, and then
you can reload your own 12 gauge. I have a 12 gauge reloader. Yeah. Mm-hmm. I actually have two. I have one that goes on a RCBS single stage, and it's designed to do like all different types of different loads. And but you only do one at a time, so it's not, you know, it's a little laborious, but you know, it works. Then there's there's several others, but probably one of the best 12 gauge reloaders for the money is it's a company called MEC. It's pronounced MEC, MEC, and they make some really good high-end 12 gauge reloaders. They have some really decent ones. They even have ones that are progressive reloaders. I'm going to run out actually right now into my reloading room, and I was going to look and see which company makes the one that I have, because it's a decent one, but it was free. So, when you have something that's free, you never say, oh, that's stupid, because I don't reload a lot of 12 gauge. I don't really shoot a lot of 12 gauge. My son shoots 20 because he likes to shoot skeet, and he
Right.
likes to
Yeah.
he likes to dove hunt too. This is a lineman, and it is an old school lineman, and it looks like it does. Let's see. It has 4 stages all in one line, and so as you run the handle down, it's basically doing something to 4 or 5 different shells all at once. And then you adjust them and move, the end one is done, you pull it off, you put a new one on the other end as you move all the others down.
Oh,
And that's
cool.
called a Lyman Easy shot shell reloader, but it's probably been around a day or two. So, and then for anybody who's just reloading like pistol or rifle, if they're just getting into it, don't go out and blow like $5,000 on reloading equipment, because you may do all of that, and then prices of ammo will come way, way down, and you'll never get your money's worth out of it. So what you do is you start with something simple like a single stage, and then you kind of build your way up. And as you start to learn how to time reloading with the way the market is working, what I do is when you can't buy ammunition, that's when I reload. I start reloading when ammunition is expensive or you can't find it. And when ammunition is cheap, because my time gets taken up by so many other projects, I would have to give up all of those different projects to sit behind a reloading press. And so I kind of look at it as a trade-off, because my time's worth money, but my projects are also worth money to me, because if I didn't build it, I would have to buy it.
Yeah.
And so I kind of look at those different things as, it's kind of how I decide to divide my level of effort. And
How is
when
that buffet going?
what's that?
How is that buffet going?
I haven't done anything to it since we last spoke, because I need oak, and oak is expensive in Arizona.
Mm.
So I stopped at just the steel, and I decided that I would wait until some of this craziness passes over.
Yeah.
And at the same time, I took some of the money that I was going to use for that oak, and I threw it towards some other projects and a couple other things that I thought were more important, that my wife and I, had our little business meeting and came to an agreement on. Because,
Powwow.
because if you go and you just throw money at a problem, and you're married and you didn't have that discussion, that causes some serious problems in a marriage. It's not about, I'm the man, so I get to make all the decisions. It's not a masculinity problem. It's when you're a team and you're pulling your resources and you're pulling your time and you're pulling your money together, then you kind of have to function like a team. And that's the way my marriage works. And I have a good relationship. I can't complain. I'm very fortunate to how effective my marriage has worked with my wife.
It sounds like you're extremely lucky, and I would never say anything negative about what you're saying. It just sounds like the words of a wise man. Like anybody that responds to what you just said with like, "Oh, you got masculinity," that person is an idiot. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like if they try to pull some sort of, "Oh, you should be the man, you should have people listening to you," then they're free to their opinion. But
Yeah. My life is enriched by my wife. My efforts are what I try to use as a reward back to my wife. For instance, making the furniture and different things like that. You know, those are all different ways that I can show how much I appreciate, you know, all the things that she does. And so it is a constant, you know, effort that you have to put in to work. You have to put in the work. It, like any relationship, it's not just a marriage. You know, any relationship is based on the amount of time that you spend with another person. And if you base all your friendships on the fact that they have to call you and you never call them, that's called a one-sided relationship. You know,
100%.
and they're usually not very. They're not productive relationships. And when I say productive, I mean what you get out of it. Because, you know, it's just like farming. It's just like woodworking. It's just like anything. You get out of it what you put into it. And I think relationships are the same way.
Absolutely.
Well, since we talked, I finished cleaning my Mark 18. So that is that's good, because now I have 4 clean guns for this weekend. 2 pistols and 2 rifles, mainly because it's kind of stupid to spend money on a course and only show up with 1 of each, because if something does happen, God forbid, you know, where you have a malfunction, you don't have time to fix it, you can always just swap out what you're shooting. But the truth is, you know, most of my stuff is Bravo Company, and I've been very successful using Bravo Company kit. I love their firearms. They're excellent. They're highly recommended by some of the industry professionals. And so I tend to go with stuff that I have good confidence in. It might not be the newest thing or the coolest thing on the market. It may not have, you know, all of the bells and whistles, but, you know, to me, it's more important that it works and goes bang every time I need it to, which is part of the reason why I'm a Glock guy. Nice. So, and I don't run out and buy the newest thing every time. I would rather spend the money on ammunition and continue to train. Every now and then there's a neat little gimmick that comes out that's worth, you know, changing something out, but it doesn't happen very often.
I get what you're saying about how you want to show up with 2 in case one goes wrong. Like, God forbid something goes wrong, but also it, you know, if you have 1, you have none. You know,
that's right. 2 is 1,
is none,
and 1 is none. Yep, and 3 is better.
3 is better.
And the truth is I actually will have a 3rd in the vehicle, because I have a 308 that remains in my truck all the time. I will hate to go through 1,000 rounds of 308 in a weekend, just simply because it took me a good amount of time to load all of that, but I would do it. It's a lot of powder to burn for paper, but if I had to, I could do it, because I have ARs that are in 5.56, and then I have ARs that are in 308. I've been a 308 person for a very long time, and it wasn't until about 15 years ago that I actually went back to 5.56. Maybe even 9 or 10 years ago. Yeah, probably 11 years ago, I went back to 5.56, because before that, for about 10 years, all I was shooting was 308.
308 either a bolt, a significantly bigger round, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you're looking at, you know, 55 grains traveling 3,100 feet per second versus, you know, like, say, for instance, I'll just use M80 ball as an example, 147 grains, you know, moving about 2750. So 308's bigger. It's a little bit slower, but it also has a better ballistic coefficient because of the length of the bullet. So you're going to have your long distance capabilities as well. Now, there's a lot of people that are like 6.5 Creedmoor is better. Well, that's true. It's true. But you know what? I don't have 14,000 rounds of 6.5 Creedmoor.
308. That
So
sounds like a good one. How much do you typically spend? Like, if you go out and you shoot 1,000 rounds to your favorite target, how much does that usually cost you?
are you talking about the cost of the course or just my general
Just
daily
for
or
like,
monthly training
just for
routine?
ammo, just for like powder and reloads, or like if
Mm,
you're buying fresh.
yeah. Let me see. I used to have some of those numbers, but ammo's been cheap lately. So it's been a while since I've run my reloader. It's probably been about 3 years actually since I've even had to reload anything because ammunition's been cheap. And so I just, I buy it, I stock up on it, I put back more, and then I'll be like, oh yeah, I need some components, so I'll buy some more components. I just bought another box of 338 Lapua. They come in a box of 50, and I only shoot one bullet in 338 Lapua. It's the 285 grain ELD Max, or Match. It's made by Hornady. That's the only bullet I use. Like I don't have any variety in my 338 Lapua. In my 308, I shoot 147, probably the most actually. And then I also have the 168. I kind of went with the FBI load instead of the military load for that. And I can't say that it's a whole lot better, but what I do like is there's less difference between my zero on my 147 grain M80 ball and my 168 grain. So there's a little bit less math to do if I'm having to shoot further distances. And so I don't have to make changes to my zeros. So that's why I like doing it that way, which is why I don't go with the 175 grain. And then 5.56, I just shoot three. I have 55 grain, 62 grain, and 77 grain. I use the 77 for the home predominantly, and then 62 that's kind of my combat load. And then 55 I use for training, and you can also use it for CQB as well because it is pretty effective for CQB. There's always going to be better loads or best loads, but for the cost, sometimes it may not even be worth going through the additional effort. It just depends on where you are. I guess for my range trips, if I go, I usually go through about once a month. I usually go through about 500 rounds a month for my training. There are times when I'll use more, and then there are times when I'll use less, depending on how many different training events I go to. That's really not that much. So the last couple months, I've been going through a lot more. So I've been going probably 650 per month. That's a couple $100 per weekend. Range fees don't really cost me anything. I'm a member, but if you're shooting with good quality people, you'd be paying more than that just to shoot with them, just to learn something from them. And if you're shooting with good people and your ammunition's fairly cheap and it's not costing you anything other than gas to get there, and for me that's not that crazy far, it's really worth what I'm doing. Like for me, I've kind of done the math in my head and said it's definitely worth going and shooting with people that are, not just regional champions, but some of them are nationally ranked champions, some of the people I shoot with. So it's definitely worth the effort and the time and the money to learn from these guys. And, who knows, maybe
maybe when they retire and say, you know what, we're done doing this, maybe they'll ask me to step in and run their program. You know, never know.
It seems like good odds. You know.
Well, I will tell you that I'm friends with people that make me look like an amateur when it comes to prepping.
I believe it.
And you will never find them on Twitter, and they will never take pictures of what they make.
No, they're taking it seriously. The rest of us are talking about it.
Yeah. I'm amateur status compared to some people I know, and I learn from them too, you know. And then every now and then they'll be like, that's interesting. You came up with that on your own? I'm like, yeah. So I built a bureau or a bookcase, and I think somewhere in my head I thought that it would be a good idea to make a bookcase to put books in. But by the time I started putting all the important stuff that I wanted to have in one central location, I don't have room for any books except for maybe 2. So all I have is gear and ammo on these bookshelves. If the thing fell over, it would probably kill me. It's a good thing it's a good thing I built it, because if it had been something I bought, it'd probably fall apart. But this thing's all oak plywood. So it's 3/4 inch oak plywood. I used Craig joints. It's got trim around the front. It's all premium pine trim, and premium pine is usually pretty good. It's not crazy expensive, but if you stain it and you put the joints together correctly, it can look pretty good. And then I used I think it's redwood. I used redwood to make this piece that goes up over the top of it. And that way, if it ever wants to become purposed as an actual bookcase, it can be left pristine as an actual bookcase. But in the meantime, it also holds my body armor on one side, and my war belt, and my second war belt hanging off of the other side. There's a spot for a gun case up top, and then on the top shelf I have like my most important things. So I have my Kevlar, which is technically an ACH with the ears cut off, with the mount for the nods on the top shelf, with my night vision. And then next to it is an IFAK, and next to it is a gunshot trauma bag. And right next to my Kevlar is a flask of bourbon, because if I have to put my headgear on, I'm going to need bourbon that day.
Yeah, if you're there getting that stuff on, might as well.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly. It's indicative of the day I'm going to have. So, and then I've got shelves of ammo and of course ammo cans. Ammo cans are great. I love ammo cans because you can drop an ammo can and it doesn't really damage anything inside. It might kill you, but it won't damage anything inside. They're pretty robust, and they last practically forever. I think I have one from the 1940s in here. I swear it's from the 1940s because the color is that much different than all the others, and it was my dad's.
Oh wow.
And so and so when it was time for me to kind of like, when my dad passed away, it was like, okay, it's time for me I have to make sure my brothers get some guns and some ammo and different things like that. And then they were like, no, this is all you. This is all you. And I'm like, no, you have to make sure that you promise me that you will take this. You'll teach my nieces, how to shoot and this and that and stuff. And you take that. And so I kind of like did the little division between, like this gun was dad's, this gun was mom's, this gun was dad's. And my dad, he was president or vice president of the gun club. So he was on the range all the time. That was our prayer meetings. That was our church service when I was a kid, was being on a range. And
the national sport.
Yeah, spending all that time, shooting. And one of the reloading presses I have in my reloading room was actually my dad's. And I was little, like really, really little. And I remember putting my finger in there and pulling the handle and it smashed my finger. And I remember crying, and I remember my dad looking at me and saying, "Hurts, doesn't it?" That was his favorite thing to say. It was like, if you hit yourself with a hammer, hurts, doesn't it? So yeah, good memories. But so
That's the best way to learn something.
It is. Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
that hurts.
I mean,
I'm not going to do that the same way next time.
and I mean, I bet you I was probably 3 when that happened, and I taught my kids all how to deprime brass. That was the first thing I taught them how to do. I think they were like 5 or 6, something like that, maybe 7. And I had them running the deprimer. I just set up one station. The only thing I had was deprimer. I would make sure that there was nothing out that had primed brass. That way they couldn't accidentally put primed brass in and run it through a deprimer. And I would just have them sit there, and I told them, like, look, count 5, lube a bullet, or lube a case, put it in there. As long as you do that, we won't have a stuck case. And I had them on a universal decapping die, so that was the only purpose it had, was just to knock that primer out. And I mean, they would sit there for hours and just run. I mean, big buckets. And I keep brass in 5-gallon buckets. I probably have about 12 or 14 of them. And I just separate them based on caliber. And then if it's something that matters, like some of my match stuff, I will sort brass based on manufacturer. Like I'll separate Lake City from, Remington or different things like that. And then like right now, all I have right now loaded sitting on the shelf is all Lake City. And it's good. It's good Lake City. Lake City is a good company. Their brass is really good quality. That's usually used in national matches, is Lake City.
Does the brass cartridge matter equally to what the bullet projectile is?
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. If you're shooting for accuracy, or if you're shooting for longevity, so the better the quality of the brass, the more times you can use it. If you don't overpower your loads, I mean, I have brass I probably use 20 times. And if you consider a 5-gallon bucket of brass being reloaded 20 times, that's a lot of ammo.
Yeah.
Yeah, when I was in the military, when I was in the Army, I used to scrounge brass, and I would save it, and I would take it back to my dad, because I knew how important it was for picking up brass when I was a kid. And every now and then, like, the military, we had to turn all our brass in, but we weren't the only people to use our military ranges. So the FBI would come out. Depending on where we were, it was all kinds of other 3-letter agencies that would come out and use the range. And they would take their brass and throw it in the dumpster. I'm not kidding. I mean, we're talking like mounds of brass in the bottom of a dumpster with all these boxes and everything else just thrown in there. And I am not a person that's too proud to jump inside a dumpster and rescue that brass. And I've done it. And I remember going home to my dad. I had probably like a 5-gallon, maybe 2 5-gallon buckets, about 2/3 of the way full. And I went home to go see him when I was on leave, and put him in the car, drove home to see him. And, I walk up to the door and I got 2 huge buckets of 5-gallon brass, and everything. And I don't know if he was more happy to see me or if he was more happy to see the brass. But I mean, it was like, I couldn't have done any wrong that day in my dad's eyes, because
Christmas.
he was very happy, very, very happy. And, you know, some of it was stuff that he shot and some of it was stuff that he didn't shoot. But the point is, you know, I took it to him, and then, you know, he was able to, you know, reload some of it for friends and stuff like that. He used to shoot with a team at Quantico, Fort Quantico, or Quantico Marine Corps Base, sorry. And he used to go to some of the match competitions at Quantico and shoot. He shot long distance with, back in the day, it was 30-06. It was about the same year that I was born. So back in the late 60s, early 70s, he would shoot 30-06 match. So 1,000-yard kind of matches with 30-06. So that was his favorite round.
1,000
I'm
yards
more.
is a long way.
It is. Yeah, it is. 1,000 yards is that's a good righteous walk. You know, you'll have a couple things figured out about yourself if you walk 1,000 yards briskly.
That's a kilometer, isn't it?
1,000 yards. Well, 1,000 meters would be a kilometer, but yeah.
Aren't yards bigger than meters?
No, meters are bigger, so it'd be So it'd be let's see, you're asking me math now, and I'm like, shit. So it's 1760 versus 1609. So 1609 is meters to a mile, and
right.
and 1760 is yards to a mile.
At 1,700 yards in a mile. That's, I mean,
And I can shoot that with my 338 Lapua though. My 338 Lapua is a mile gun.
my decimalized brain has a hard time understanding how anything breaks down into 17.
Well, that's one of my next big challenges in my life. This next weekend is one of them. You know, this has been on my bucket list for a long time, is to take a formalized course from, you know, somebody that's very accomplished. And me and two other guys sought this guy out and said, this is the guy we want to have teach us on this course. And we set everything up, and we got, you know, the whole thing put together basically. And one of my mentors that runs our particular club, you know, we've had other guys come in and teach classes, and this one's kind of like a little bit bigger of a deal, because the guy that's teaching the course, he's been in probably over 400, you know, actual combat related, you know, gunfights, like firefights. So he brings a lot of knowledge. He's not just extremely lucky. He's obviously good at what he does. And, and a lot of them were at closer distances. You know, it's not like, oh, you know, it's somebody shooting over there. You know, it's more like, you know, as you're moving, bits and pieces of the wall are flying off of, you know, and hitting you because they're that close to hitting you. So I mean, his experiences are in my opinion, are valuable, and that's kind of what I want to learn in this course. I've got another course that I'm working on setting up, which is more of a doping class. And when I say dope, I'm talking data on previous engagements, which is has to do with more on the science of shooting distance. And so there's me and about 12 other guys that want to have that class put together. And we have one guy that's going to give us an interim course, and then we have a guy that we really want to take the course with, but we don't know if he's going to travel to us, because sometimes that's where the real savings is. If they'll come to you, if you already have, you know, the number of people that they require for a class, they'll come. You just have to set it up. But if if everybody cancels or whatever, you go on their blacklist. They'll never
Yeah.
come back again, because they already put up money and took time on their schedule, and now you've messed them up. So you have to be really serious about it. But then what I want to do is I want to take that class, which will be 2 classes from now, and then sometime before my 50th birthday, my goal is to become part of the mile club. And that means, hitting a human-sized target at a mile.
That's
So
that's a awesome goal. I mean, it's inspiring that you keep doing these classes in something that, like, I mean, I would consider you an expert in, right?
and see, that's the difference, because people who probably don't shoot a lot would consider me an expert, but I don't by any means, because I know what I'm not good at. And that's why I'm doing what I'm doing, because I want to get better. And I want to, I have a list of things that I wanted to do. And what I did was I took my bucket list and I said, okay, what's a good rounded year to be able to accomplish all of these things on? And I think it was sometime around when I was 30 or 31 years old that I started my bucket list. And slowly I've kind of worked down a lot of the things on my bucket list. But this, shooting a mile it's expensive. It's expensive and it's time consuming. And what I mean by that is if somebody lives on a ranch and they have access to, the back 40,
Yeah.
and they can shoot whenever they want, then it's not going to be as time consuming for them as it is somebody who doesn't live on a ranch, right? So it's all relative in that regard. But then the cost part of it comes into play, because I don't just want any gun, and I don't want just any caliber that's going to shoot a mile. I did all the math and figured out which one I wanted, and I did all the math and figured out which rifle I wanted, and then I did all the math and figured out which optic I wanted on it. So, I mean, it's not because I went out and asked somebody, which gun should I buy? I did the math myself. I did all the figuring myself. Now I want to prove that I came up with the right equipment. See, so it's like a test for me. And so that's kind of how I do a lot of things. And it's kind of how I got into welding, really, because I welded when I was younger. My welds were probably terrible. The welding shop was owned by my best friend in high school, so he probably just kind of nodded and said, "Good job, guys. All right, okay. Why don't you go find something to do," so he could get back to work, so that he could actually go back and fix what we welded. But that was one of those things I just wanted to get better at. I don't have to be the best welder. I just wanted to make what I wanted to make. And you've seen pictures of some of the stuff that I built. I get people every now and then that are like, "Oh, you need to go into business. You need to make this and stuff." And I'm like, "No, that's not what I'm trying to do." Like, that was my goal. I wanted to accomplish it. I met that goal. Now I'm moving on to my next goal. So I'm going through all of these processes, because these are all things that I want to do and want to experience before I'm a certain age. And then maybe when I'm that certain age and I'm done running out and trying to accomplish all these different things that were on my list, then maybe I can just say, you know what, now I'll teach other people. Because at that point, maybe I've earned that right.
Or heck, you could just write a second chapter.
Yeah, maybe. But I mean, remember that, after a certain age, you just start to grind down and you start to fail and things start to break. And, you and I, we've already talked about our previous injuries. There's certain things that I'm just not going to be as effective doing now.
Yeah.
But, so I have to learn to be satisfied with the level of accomplishments that I do make. And so I think that's kind of what I'm working on, is just being good enough to do all the things that I wanted to do, before I'm too old to do them.
Yeah. I was talking recently to MRJ, and we were talking about how both me and him ended up kind of like jack of all trades, but with no mastery of that one.
Yeah.
And currently, that's where I'm at. I'm at the whole, which path do I start walking more heavily, because it is it's the productive one.
Yeah. Was it Robert Heinlein said, a human being should be able to con a ship, write a sonnet, plan an invasion. There's like a long list of things. I can't even remember what the
I
list
think I know what
is.
you're talking about. Yeah.
Yeah, he said specialization is for insects, and I think that when I read that quote, probably when I was about 35, or maybe about 35, when I actually bothered to crack a book open that said, Robert Heinlein. I was impressed by that quote, just simply because it kind of told me how many things I wasn't very good at. Now, maybe I'll actually get my wish, and I'll be able to make a little sailboat, and in my 50s, I can take that little sailboat out and learn how to sail on one of our little small lakes that we have here in Arizona. And that might just be enough to keep me occupied, and and keep me busy, and enjoy that. One of my neighbors down the street makes paddle boards, but he builds them himself. And he's a pretty accomplished woodworker.
Skip, can you see this book?
Haha, that's funny. I see it.
I just found it on the shelf just based on what you're talking about. This is a book you would fucking love if you want to build your own little sailboat. It's got all the
Yeah. What I was looking at was like something literally like a sunfish. Like you just sit on it. It's like a sit-on boat. There's not like a bottom per se or anything like that. But just because I know that project is obtainable, because I mean, I have like my wish list, but then I have to whittle my wish list down to what can I actually accomplish. Because otherwise, I found that for a period in my life, that all I did was sit around and say, man, it would be really cool if I could, and never do it.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that to make anybody else who's experienced that feel bad. I just got tired of that. I got tired of saying, man, it'd be really cool if, and then that never happening. And I got to a point where I said, you know what? I'm going to figure out how to make this happen. And I just started working down a list like that. And that's kind of how I've gotten to where I am. And I'm just not done. I got more things to do. So, I don't like have the list written like on the wall or anything like that. I wrote it in a book that I haven't opened probably in 3 years, because in the last 3 years, all I've done is work down 2 things on the list. That's it. So I'll go back, and after this course, I'll be cracking that book open, and I'll be like, okay, what else do I have? Now I do know my shooting a mile. I'm probably going to spend a lot more time overthinking it, because that's kind of how I am about everything. And then I'll be like, okay, now it's about application. Like I've got all the math down. I've got the science. I understand the physics, and the, I understand the equation and how it's getting there, and what the trajectory is, and how to determine what the trajectory is, and the holdover and all those things. I got that. Now it's time to actually get out there and do application, and I've done, long distance shooting, and I've done different types of, training schools and different things like that, but not to this level. And that's what I want to do next. And so that way I know, like, okay, I can pick up that rifle. Yep. That's about a mile away. Yep. That's about the size of the steel or whatever it is that I'm shooting, and shoot it and be like, okay, that's good. I accomplished what I wanted to do. So I have a set of dies. I've got bullets. I've got primers. I'm still a little low on brass. I'm having a hard time finding a good source for brass. And then when I do find a good source for brass, I don't have the money. And then when I have the money, I can't find the brass again. So at some point, I'll probably get that rectified, so that I can get the right brass, because I know that I don't want to just use a whole bunch of different mixed brasses, because that's not very precision. You're really supposed to have all the same brass, and it's all supposed to come from the same lot. And
Yeah.
that's going to be hard to accomplish, certainly now in these days, with the way things are going, or the way things have been lately.
Yeah. With the trending
Yeah.
down aspect.
Yeah, it is kind of a trend, I think. And
Um,
so,
for ammo down there, do you ever sell ammo when it like the price spikes, you know?
no,
It's
no, because
old.
it's a consumable. It would be like me selling the deer that I have in my freezer. You're like, no, I have that deer in the freezer for me.
Yeah,
You know what I mean?
I do.
So no, the only way I would sell ammo is if I didn't have the firearm that ammo went to. And probably what I would do instead of selling it is I would barter it with a friend that was looking for that particular caliber, and maybe he had something that I needed. Because that's usually the way I do things.
Yeah, trade something for something.
Yeah. Yeah. I had somebody send me, I won't mention them, but they're one of my Twitter followers, send me a link, and they said, hey, do you know what kind of handguard this is? And I was like, yeah, actually I do. Not only do I know what kind of handguard it is, but I actually have a couple pieces that go to that handguard. Would you be interested? And they were like, heck yeah. And I was like, here, just DM me your mailing address and I'll send it to you. And I didn't want them to pay me because it was literally just sitting in a bin. And they were like, no, we have a business. And so they sent me a couple of their products as a result. Like, they were like, no, we absolutely have to give you something back. And I was like, no, that's cool. That's fine. But I didn't want them to think that I was like trying to sell them something. It's just, if it's something that they could benefit from, I would rather them have it than it sit in a bin because I don't use that handguard anymore.
That's actually kind of my take on why I'm so like just vocal, you know, like some people like we were saying before, those hardcore survivalists and preppers, they're
Mm-hmm.
not on the internet talking about it, you know what I mean? They're walking the walk. But there's a
They're an
place.
actual survivalist,
Yeah,
where I'm more of like a community oriented. I want to like have a group of people that can work together to maintain some level of civilization and society when it's not present everywhere else. And that there's a difference, which is why I kind of specify myself as a survivalist with a conscience.
and it's kind of like, you know, that's what we have in the bucket, right? And if we were to be that survivalist that just squirrels up in a bunker to save themselves, then, you know, that thing in the bucket
What's the
doesn't help.
point in surviving?
Exactly.
Right? I mean, if literally there's nothing left but what you have in your bunker, what was the point? Right? I mean, I like my neighbors. I like the old man that lives across the street, that I see him get in his truck and go get his mail every day. I like these people. They're people that I'd like to see survive. And so, like, for me, it's more about an outreach of, how many of us can work together to get through what's coming. And, you know, some people have thought, you know, that's kind of weird. Like, what do you think is going to happen that you need all of that? I get that question every now and then. Usually people that see what I have aren't in that place where they think that way. Because most people are, I guess some people would be aghast if they saw my gun room. They would be like, oh my God, how much of that is legal, right? I mean, that's probably the average person's reaction. Like, why does anybody need all of that? Right. But that's really just my business, right? And but people who actually do like go to the range with me, see me put some of this into action and run, you know, and you know, somebody asked me, they're like, well, why don't you compete? Well, I do. I compete every single time I go to the range. It's just that I don't care what the piece of paper says, and I care about the time, but the only thing I care about the time is did I beat it the last time that I shot? That's all I care about. I don't have to be the best shooter that showed up at the range that day. What makes my day is when one of the people that I think are the best shooters said, you know, you did really good today. Like, to me, that's like the best thing I could hear. Like, you really did good today. Like, I love hearing that. To me, because if I go out and I put my best down and it's better than it was 6 months ago or a year ago, then to me, that is my competition.
Yeah,
I
that's
won.
how you win.
Right. I won because I did better than I did a year ago, and I just keep practicing and getting better and practicing and getting better. And some people will say that they shoot like 3-gun or, you know, different competitions and stuff to get better. And I believe that that's true. But I also am an RSO, a range safety officer, and I RSO some competitions, and I have to DQ people for unsafe acts on these competition ranges. And I'm not talking about like, oh, well, you know, you didn't have a, you know, like maybe your grip wasn't the best, or I'm not talking like that kind of a DQ. I'm talking about like muzzle or, you know, different things like that, or sweeping yourself, sweeping other people with your muzzle, different things like that. And I'm thinking to myself, like, if you feel like you have to sweep a person that's next to you in order to win, I don't want to be around you. And the truth is, I've been to some of those competitions and I've seen the way some people handle their firearms and the way they are around their firearms. And I don't really like being around people like that. And so that's another reason. And it's not a slight against everyone that shoots competitively, because there are phenomenal shooters out there. Some of the people I shoot with are competitors. But there's a percentage of people out there that say, you know, safety's really like around rung 4. We're not really that concerned about it. And for me, it's like all about safety, because when you need to do it and you're under stress, that's not the time to say, well, that's not how we do it in the competition. Because at that point, it's like the real deal, right? And you're in the middle of it. And if you haven't trained the way you're going to do it in a gunfight, and you're throwing a shotgun in a barrel and picking a rifle up off of something else, that's not how combat works. And if you have your house set up that way, maybe, but I don't think that most people have 55-gallon drums around their house with guns laying on top of them and guns pointed, you know, muzzle down, fully loaded in them all the time. I just don't see that as being super practical. And so
I couldn't think of a single place where that would exist.
Right. And so if that's the way you're training, then that's the way you're going to fight. So that's just my thought. And I don't mean to hammer on competitors, because they have their reasons for why they have to set things up. You know, some of the ranges that we do are cold ranges. That means you show up and your weapon is empty, or your firearms are empty, and you have I mean, your magazine can be loaded, they don't care, but they just don't want a round in the chamber. They don't want a magazine in the gun and all that. But some of those rules are kind of forced on them and pushed on them. And some of those rules are good because you're talking about a little bit broader of a range of experience. And some people maybe aren't experienced enough to carry a loaded weapon all the time, 24/7. And certainly when you're not the one that's covering their liability, but the range is, I get it. And so, they're like, nope, we run a cold range. You practice really, really hard. You do all these cool things. And then when you leave, you chamber and then you're good to go. And I'm okay with that because that keeps that one person that shows up that says, oh, I've never done this before. I'd like to shoot with you guys. That keeps that one person from shooting me, honestly. And so if that's the rule that has to be there, then I'm fine with it.
And as a person with injuries, it's a little bit more apparent that the safety is something you really want for yourself.
Well, so not to get into too many personal experiences, but I've seen people die, right? And I'd like to try to prevent that to me and the people that I care about around me. And I also know what it's like to have hands on someone that you can't save, and have them, bleed out or suffocate because of an obstruction or whatever. I worked in the EMT world and a police officer when I was younger. And so I know what those kinds of things are like. And so for me, it's more about trying to get as realistic a training as possible to make people be able to respond to situations that are safe, in the fact that they don't, end up shooting their wife, in the process of dispatching a bad guy or something like that.
Yeah.
But at the same time, if something happens to you, you know what to do to stop the bleeding. You know how to put a tourniquet on. You have a tourniquet on you. I carry a tourniquet on me probably about 60% of my day, maybe more, depending on what I'm doing and where I'm going. I either have one in my pocket, or I've got one on my belt, or I've got one on my bag. I have a gunshot trauma kit. I've got an active shooter response kit. I keep one at my desk at work. Everybody that I work with knows that I have stuff like that, so that they're like, okay, well, we know who we're going to talk to about the sucking chest wound, because this person's dealt with one before, so they know what it's like. So I mean, those kinds of things are, to me, that's just making everybody around me just a little bit safer because of the level of knowledge that I've gone out and sought after. And I encourage other people to do the same, because you want to be that person that can be the person that says, you know what, I got this. I know how to handle this. I've done this before. You pick up the phone, call 911, tell them that we have and then you explain what the situation is. And then it's not about taking over the situation. It's that sometimes if you don't, no one will.
Yeah. Somebody has to.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's not, I don't see it as like a control, like I have to be in control, although I do like some of that myself, but like, driving, and I prefer to be behind the wheel instead of in the passenger seat. But
100%. I completely get that. I am the worst passenger.
And it's not because I'm the best driver in the world. It's just, sometimes you don't like relinquishing, that control, right? And that's okay. I mean, I know that about me. Now it doesn't mean that I don't let my wife drive, because of course I let my wife drive. She has her car. So when we go places, it's like, hey, do you feel like driving? Yeah. Okay, cool. you know, and then I'm just the gunner, right?
Yeah. Shotgun.
Yeah, I mean, how do you shoot and drive at the same time? You know, that's what the passenger's for. You know, in the military, we call that the TC, right? Or the tank commander, or the troop. You know, the TC is the tank commander, but it also could be that you're just the gunner. You're the one that's pulling the trigger while the other person's taking evasive action or maneuvers. So, you know, I guess there's several different ways you can look at it. But
Yeah, that's definitely a silver lining to the passenger chair.
yeah.
I hadn't thought of.
Well, you know, it's like my kid. I taught my kids, you know, the whole shotgun thing, right? So they were like, shotgun, you know, it was like, you know, calling shotgun. And so one time, you know, they called shotgun, and I handed them a shotgun. They're like, seriously? I'm like, yeah, sure. Just keep the muzzle down. Don't touch the trigger. Leave the safety on. So they rode shotgun. They thought that was the coolest thing ever.
I mean, I'm sure it would be. You know,
I taught my kids how to drive when they were 12.
That's awesome.
Yeah, like we started on dirt roads, like out in the mountains and, you know, way out in the desert. And then, you know, slowly I would start introducing them to, like, you know, unoccupied roads at weird hours of the night, you know, different things like that. Or like before it was dark, but when it was like before it was like DUI time.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because, you know, if you're on back roads and stuff, of course you're going to find somebody that's been drinking, of course. Right. And so, you know, if my kids are going to be behind the wheel, I'm being extra safe. So I'm like, okay, we're going to get out there, we're going to drive around. And then as it starts to get a little bit more dusk and we're driving back, you're not going to look like a kid in the steering wheel, right? Because it's dark enough that they can't see. And then I would have them kind of drive in, you know, and drive home, you know, on using back roads and stuff and back ways. I would keep them off the bypass, or, you know, we would go the long way, or we would go through like slower residential areas, you know, slowly. And then eventually we worked our way up. And probably by the time they were 14, they could handle just about any road. And then at 15, I stopped them. And I was like, nope, you're not driving anymore. And they're like, what? I'm like, you're too close to getting your permit. And if we get caught, well, first off, I know I'll lose my license for letting them drive. But if we get caught, now it's going to affect you too, because they won't let you have your license till you're 18.
Yeah.
And so you know, while you are like, yeah, sure, I don't care. But, you know, at that point, it's like there's a part in your brain that's not letting you think this through. So I'm going to kind of make the decision on this one. Because we all know that teenagers are brain damaged, right? It just happens.
100%.
Sometime around 14 or 15. Sometimes it's sooner, sometimes it's later, but they get brain damaged. And then you're like, okay, no, you're not making that decision right now. I'm going to make the call. It's my car. And I'm the one responsible for the medical bill. So for now, I'm the one making the calls. And, you know, you come up with your own insurance and your own car and your own health insurance, and you have your own roof over your head, then you can make those decisions the way you want. But for now, I'm making the call. And so we have this, well, but why? You know, it's like, but why? You know, it's like, okay, after like 4 or 5 but whys, I think we're done.
Yeah. At what point do you get to just come back with, because I'm smarter than you?
I never really used that as an argument. And I never said because I said so. Like I always hated that answer. Because I said so. It just seems like it's, you know, I will give them a reason. Right. So, but anyway, so yeah, then we got them, you know, their permits and got them their license and all that kind of stuff. And I'd like to think that they're better drivers because of the fact that I taught them how to drive earlier.
Well, for sure.
I was always of the belief that the whole 6 months with a permit was nowhere near enough time to actually be responsible for what you're doing with a vehicle. And so somebody posted it to me a long, long time ago, and I said, you know what, that's a good idea. I think I'm going to do that with my kids. And I did. And it worked. So, and I don't want to say that my kids haven't really had car accidents per se, but what I will say is like, you know, a fender bender because you misjudged, you know, going around like one of those little steel poles or something, you know, like I don't really classify that as an accident per se. I mean, of course it's stupid, and of course I made them feel like shit over it, but
Of course.
to me, I don't really qualify that as like hitting another vehicle, hitting another person, you know, those kinds of things, running off of a road,
Yeah.
you know, not paying attention, you know, on the phone, that kind of thing. Like that's the number one killer of teenagers, right? Is texting and driving or whatever. So I was more concerned that they were going to do that. And so then, of course, the first thing I did with my daughter is make sure that I put in a Bluetooth stereo. We don't buy new cars, we buy used cars, but I'll put a $200 stereo that lets you do hands-free, because I know sooner or later you're going to answer the call.
Yeah.
So I'd rather you do it hands-free than just wink, wink, nod, nod. Don't use the phone while you're driving, and know that they are, right?
Yeah.
So it's just like that extra step.
I mean, I learned to drive while using a cell phone. You know what I mean? Like, I was the exact worst age of a person to learn to deal with having a cell phone, you know, because I was exactly that age where you're learning to drive and you're getting all that freedom.
And you had all that brain damage.
Oh, did I ever? I only barely just got over that brain damage. And I mean, I say that, but I know some guy on the internet is gonna be like, "Oh, but did you?" You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
No, it's true, because, you know, it's like, it's part of it is, and they say it has something to do with the frontal lobe, and it's not fully developed until, you know, somebody's 25 or something like that. And maybe that has a part to do with it, or maybe it doesn't. But what I've noticed is that, you know, it's like a lot of it has to do with time that you put in with your kid and teaching them how to do things. And if you don't do it earlier, what will happen is they'll get to an age where they don't want to be around you anymore. And it happens. I mean, trust me, sometimes I'll go weeks and I won't see my daughter, and I'll be like, what the heck? Like, but I won't do that whole insecure thing. Like, do you not love me? You know what I mean? That never enters the equation, right? I understand you're busy. You do your thing. And, you know, at some point it'd be cool to see you, because I like to know that you're alive, and, you know, that kind of thing. And she'll laugh and she'll be like, okay, Dad, I'm sorry. You know, and then she'll show up, and she'll want to watch a show or something like that. She's coming over for dinner Thursday, because tomorrow night is April Fool's. And what we're doing,
Dude, it is.
I'm doing a podcast tomorrow, and it's going to be Collapsitarian April Fool's, but instead of an apostrophe S, it's S, like April Fool's, like there's a bunch of us. And so I'm going to actually open the bourbon, and I'm going to break my sobriety cycle of 90 days tomorrow. See? So, because I said, you know, a human being can only go, right, 3 minutes without air,
3 days without food.
No, 3 hours. You have to go in order. So 3 hours without shelter, 3 days without water, 3 weeks without food, and 3 months without bourbon.
Yeah.
And so I had to put it to a test to see if I could survive. And tonight, you know, my hand's shaking. No, I'm just kidding. So I have the bourbon ready. It's a Maker's Mark 46 is what I'm going to drink tomorrow night.
And you're doing the Collapsitarians April Fools.
Yep, and we're going to toast the collapse.
Well, that'll be awesome. I'll cheers to that.
Yeah, for sure. We're talking about doing it on live YouTube. So if that happens, I will share the link tomorrow. If we can make it happen, I will share the link, and that way, well, you'll you'll hear it before other people hear this podcast, but because you usually take a couple of days to get it, you know. Actually, you uploaded the last one pretty quick. You uploaded it overnight, and it was ready the next morning.
Yeah, I mean, on my end, it's not much. I don't really edit them when I throw them on YouTube. I just throw the whole thing up, and
well, we're hurting people on this one. What are we, like 2 hours right now?
oh gosh, I don't even know. Time kind of disappears as soon as this screen comes up in front of me. I lose track.
I'm not a good time manager. Although I can multitask. I cleaned that weapon, and since I've been talking to you, I put a bag together, and I was getting another gear bag ready for. I'm trying to organize everything, and it drives my wife crazy. But the way I organize is I pull everything out everywhere. It's like piles and piles and piles. In the Army, we used to call it a TA-50 explosion, where gear is just everywhere. And then I divide things into piles, and I'm like, okay, and then this, and then this, and then that. That's my wintertime gear, and this is my summertime gear. And then I rotate, like my summer to my winter, so that like if I'm stranded in my vehicle, I don't have the wrong sleeping bag or whatever. And then I have like this process that I go through, and it drives my wife crazy because gear is everywhere all over the house for like a couple days. But this time it's worse because I was doing that at the same time that I was trying to clean my gun room. My gun room had no walking floor. Like you could literally you'd have to plan your next step in hopes that you didn't fall.
Standing on guns.
That was how bad my gun room was. So now I actually have some floor space. And instead of taking a week to do it, I've only taken 12 days.
I organize in the exact same way. If I get to like a messy tool bench or whatever, a packed anything, it doesn't matter. You just take everything out, get an empty space, push it back into, get things compartmentalized and put them back in. And then, lo and behold, by the time you're done, you got double the free space,
It's the way my brain works is part of it. And I think part of it is just because organization is a learned behavior. And for whatever reason, I like organization. I just can't obtain it. Like I have such a hard time with it. And so I have to plan organization. Organization doesn't happen randomly. Like, oh, that was fortuitous. No, that's not how organization works. You have to plan it. And, I'm good at planning some things, but organization is not one of them. It takes me a while to get what it is put the way I wanted it. And my wife just laughs. She doesn't say anything. She just laughs. Because, she knows that I want to know what she's thinking, but she knows I won't ask because then I'll just get mad. And so she just laughs. And I don't ask. And, I get done what I was going to get done. And then, the world is a better place. And then the birds start singing again.
Is it bird singing springtime down there?
Oh yeah. Today they were loud as hell. I actually had to tell them to I said keep it down, because I was trying to concentrate. They was getting loud. But yeah, it's definitely spring
up here.
It's definitely spring. We get the spring winds in March down here, so we have winds that will literally just pick up every random thing and toss it. Like trash cans on trash day are like blown halfway down the road. It's crazy.
Up here, it's insane. It's looking like we might have snow into the middle of April.
Wow.
I mean, it snowed today.
That's going to be hard on the growing season too.
Oh, fuck. Tell me about it. And if it goes like last summer does, where we get this weird winter that goes real late, but then all of a sudden in the springtime, it's extremely wet. We get lots and lots of rain and stuff, but then the summer doesn't get hot enough to dry it all out.
Yeah.
So it's just a swamp.
Yeah.
It that's exactly what it looks like it's shaping up for this year. It's going to be just a nightmare.
Yeah, that's going to be tough for farmers. I think it's going to be hard. I think that people should be smart and try to figure out how they can help their local farmers, because the closer to you are to your food source, the more of a friend they should be. And the only way that's going to happen is if you work with them. I think that's
And
my thought.
and the scary thing about that too is that with this current, like, all these quarantines and the lockdowns, and what this is going to do to those small local farms is just unimaginable, right? Because they get all their business from like a farmer's market or like
Yeah. Well,
just
they're going to have to
small.
raise prices, and Americans don't like raising prices because they have been taught that gouging is bad. But the truth of the matter is, if you don't raise prices, you have shortages instead. And I think everybody has experienced enough shortages of toilet paper to realize that what I'm saying is true. You would rather pay a little bit more for some toilet paper than to have to go stand in line for 4 hours at Costco to go get toilet paper. Yes, I'm talking to the toilet paper hoarders right now.
It's so funny too, because that all started because people in Australia buy all their toilet paper from China. So they were freaking out because, they're not going to be having any toilet paper shipment from China. And the
Right.
whole world watches like one little thing out of Australia and they think, oh shit, we all need toilet paper.
Yeah.
And when we produce most of our toilet paper in North America, I'm sure.
Yeah. Yeah. A lot of our sandpaper comes from Canada.
Oh, I mean, that's interesting. I wonder what the Canadian exports are.
Well, I know that I get some of my steel, and it's from Canada as well. And I actually like it. I mean, I'm not trying to make Canadians feel better about themselves right now, but honestly, I think that Canadian steel is really good steel.
Appreciated. I mean, we
Yeah.
definitely need something we can feel good about. It seems
When,
more and more likely that we're to be blamed for this whole frickin'
well, the last time I was welding, the steel held up really well. So, take that compliment. You deserve it.
quality. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Fuck. I I was thinking of when I was learning to drive back in the day. I learned to drive at work.
Oh, wow.
I was 14 and I was working on a golf course that, they have a driving range where you just hit balls.
Yeah.
I drove a shitty old stick pickup truck with one of the little tractor attachments on the front to pick up the golf balls. I've just been thinking back to that. That is where I learned how to drive, on that shitty stick pickup truck in the middle of a farm field.
I learned how to drive on a truck as well. It was, my dad had a 1951 3/4-ton Dodge Power Wagon, but it was the military version. So it was the M37, which was a 3/4-ton Army truck. And I learned how to drive on that. My sister did too. In fact, I learned how to keep your hands in front of you because she kept popping the clutch and it kept putting my head into the windshield because the windshield on those trucks were the kind that you could actually fold down or you could fold up. So the whole windshield would lay down sort of like a Jeep, or you could put the windows up, like just like undo a little thing, you like, loosen it and on both sides and then open it. And then you would turn them and they crank them and they would stay open while you were driving. So I guess for like really hot days, since there's no air conditioning. And well, in 1951, very few things had air conditioning anyway. But
Yeah.
the point is that I learned how to drive on that truck, but I also learned how to keep my head from hitting the windshield, because my sister, she was learning how to drive and she was, kind of jerking the or letting out on the clutch too hard.
Yeah,
And
slam it in
of
his gear.
course, yeah, and of course it was it was already in gear, but it was like that learning that clutch to gas relationship, that ratio. It can be tricky, but it can be really tricky on a truck that you have to double clutch for first gear, right? And so to put it in first gear. And so she would do that. Well, in the meantime, my brother was running behind the truck and he was throwing the firewood back on the truck because we had the tailgate down. And she was driving and all the wood was flying out of the back and my head was hitting the windshield. So my parents, they laughed about that for years. They were like, oh my gosh, you should have seen all of you kids learning how to drive and you had a load of wood in the back and your brother was picking up the wood and throwing it back in because he knew if he didn't do it, he was going to have to go get a wheelbarrow and go all the way down and pick up one piece at a time all the way up the hill. We lived in a log cabin on the side of the mountain. And so, you know, it's not that hard for wood to come flying out the back when you're on a hill and you're popping the clutch.
Yeah,
So,
just lurching your way up.
so probably a really entertaining sight for my parents to watch. They thought it was funny.
It's overdue for parents to go back to that form of parenting where they watch their kids get, you know, a bloody nose or whatever and just laugh.
Well, yeah, like, you know, your technique, you know, has a lot to be desired, but you nailed the landing.
There's so many kids nowadays that are just so overprotected that they never get any sort of.
They're deprived of the opportunity to fail.
Yeah.
That's what it is, unfortunately. And, you know, it's like, how do you, you know, it's a lot more expensive to fail as you get older.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it
that's
hurts.
a good
It
point.
hurts a lot more.
Their
It hurts a lot more.
introduction, their
Yeah, I
introduction
remember.
to like college age.
I remember as a teenager wrecking, I mean, like head over heels, ass over tin cups or teacups, wrecking my bike when I was younger. Do you know that if you were to say, see that hill right there? I dare you to ride this bike down that hill. And just the fear in the back of my head of, you know what, there's no way I'm going to make it down that hill without flying over the handlebars and, you know, somersaulting down part of that hill because it's so steep, right?
Yeah.
Today, there's no way in hell I would do that. But when I was a teenager, I would do that shit every day. And I'd fall and get back up. And I'd fall and I'd get back up. And yeah, okay, I broke a couple bones or I messed this up or that hurts or that kind of thing. But I did it. And I learned then a lot of lessons that I don't want to learn now because they hurt a lot more.
Yeah.
And so I kind of look at it as when you deprive, you know, kids of those opportunities, you know, I let my kids throw knives, throw tomahawks. It was really funny. The boys were smacking each other with these long ass sticks. And my one stepson says to my wife, you know, that hurts. And she's like, well, don't let him hit you with it. It's like, if it hurts, why are you letting him hit you with it? You know, it's like a real common sense solution, you know? So yeah, my wife and I, we have a very similar parenting style, which I think is probably also good. We both came up from the same, roughly the same stock as far as her parents and the way they raised their kids versus my parents. So we kind of see a lot of things very similarly, and so it's not that hard of a process. Our parenting styles differed slightly, but not greatly. Whereas my ex-wife and I, we had a lot different parenting styles, which made it challenging, you know?
Yeah.
So don't get divorced and don't get shot. Both of those things really suck.
I could not ever argue with that. That sounds like, you know, solid advice.
Yeah.
If you can avoid situations where they're combined, even better.
Yeah. Yeah. Don't get shot by your ex-wife. No, I'm just kidding. That never happened. I don't want anybody to think that, you know, the first thing I did was teach my wife how to shoot. That way I wouldn't argue with her.
Smart, very smart.
See, now I know that yes, dear is the right answer.
Women have all this knowledge that they just let us in on.
I was saying that with an earshot of her to see what face she made.
Well, that's awesome. Freaking, where do we go from there? What topic should we cover? Hey,
Well, I should probably call it because we made chili, and I'm starting to smell it all the way in the back of the house, which means it's probably done.
it's abundantly food time for you.
Oh, we did jalapenos and hatch chilies, and I didn't do like my $40 chili, which is what my wife calls it, because every time I make chili for friends, she's like, "You spent way too much money on that chili," because I had like so many nice ingredients in it. And this
Yeah.
time, you know, we're kind of rationing our food a little bit, and it's just because, you know, we don't know how long this thing will last, so we're, you know, not going all out on our meals and stuff like that. And so she's like, "No, we're not making $40 chili. We're making just regular chili, but we're still doing 2 pots." So my chili has jalapenos, about, I don't know, maybe 10 or 15, maybe 10, and then probably about 10 hatch chilies. So it's not crazy hot. It's not like I normally like it, um, but I like chili regardless. It's just that I like it really hot, like 4 alarm kind of chili
Yeah,
is
the
really
stuff
good for me.
stuff would kill me, man. I'd need to
I
drink mayonnaise.
well, you know, I do eat my chili with sour cream,
That's
and
the best way.
some people say that that's like taking a knee, but
What?
I like sour cream in my chili, so I eat my chili the way I like it. If I'm going to eat sour cream, then I want to also taste the heat, so that's why I make it a little bit hotter.
That's hot peppers pretty much grow just outside for you in Arizona, hey?
Almost. We have bird peppers that are like that. They're called chiltepin, which is basically, it's a Mexican bird pepper, and they're really small, so they look sort of like tiny serrano peppers, but they're really hot, and like some people will take one and throw it in a pot of chili and be like, "Okay, there's our spice." So if you like hot foods, then you'll probably like chiltepin. They're a little bit hotter than a jalapeno. The first one I had, a friend of mine had them growing wild in his backyard, and he was like, "Hey, try one of these." And I was like, "Oh, okay." So I pick it up and I put it in my mouth and start chewing on it. And he was like, "Whoa, whoa, what are you doing?" I was like, "You said to try it, you know." And of course, it hit me just like super hot. I had no water, nothing, you know. It's like I just had to gut it, right? No water to like help wash it down, nothing,
Rough.
you know. And it was hot. It was definitely hot. But yeah, his wife was Mexican, and they love those kinds of foods, and so he was like, "Yeah, no, that's not the kind of pepper you're supposed to just pick up and eat like a grape. They're they're a little hot." And I found out that they have some heat to them. Some are hotter than others. It just depends. But what's interesting about the Mexican bird pepper, or chiltepin, is that they don't germinate unless a bird eats the seeds, and then it processes through the bird and comes out wherever it lands. That germinates it, and that's where the bird pepper will grow. So the birds literally spread the seed.
And that's the only way that they'll germinate.
That's my understanding. Yeah.
That's awesome.
Which is pretty cool if you think about it, because it's like, you know, what are the chances of that happening? Like right here, and here I am. I've got this, you know, chiltepine growing in my backyard. So I think that's kind of cool. But yeah, so chili. I've got my chili going, and it's going to be nice and hot, and I'm probably going to have some sour cream on it. And I used to like cornbread, but then when I went keto, I stopped eating the cornbread because it's too high in carbs. My goal was, you know, to meet like my fighting weight. Some people don't have a fighting weight, but I know what my fighting weight is. My fighting weight is the weight that and the shape and the condition that I was in when I went to SF selection way back. And so that was my goal for this course, and I didn't make it. I got close, but I didn't make it. So I'm still going to punish myself until I make my my weight goal.
I have to gain a lot of weight to get back to my fighting weight.
Right. Because your injury, you lost a lot of weight.
Yeah, I mean, I tried to get fat. I tried to gain weight because I've always been like chronically underweight. But
yeah,
even in the wheelchair, man, I lost weight. It was I don't know. Stupid metabolism.
Now, see, when I was injured, I gained weight, and I think it's because my metabolism slowed way down in the middle of all of that, because I was in a wheelchair for months, and then I was on crutches and wasn't supposed to, you know, and then of course they had me taking all these different drugs that probably slowed my metabolism even more. And so for me, it was an exact opposite, where, you know, and for a year and a half, I walked on a cane. But that the doctor, in fact, my cane's right here, but a doctor told me that I wasn't going to walk again. They wanted to amputate my right leg below my knee, and I wasn't really interested in that option. And they were mad. Like the two doctors were mad. They ended up having another doctor come down from Walter Reed to make an assessment as to whether they could salvage the leg. And he said, yes, we can salvage the leg. But the two that were at Fort Bragg that were like supposed to be ankle experts said, no, there's no saving this ankle. It's gone.
And
there's
you've
too
walked
much
on it for how many decades now?
Has it been 18, 19? Let's see, 03. 03. So
Goes to show you.
I don't know how many years that is, but it was a while ago.
Goes to show you not to listen to the doctors, man, because they told me the same thing. They you know, I mean, they never said that they were going to amputate, but they said many times that it's something that I had to be you know, prepared for. And they didn't expect me to be able to walk. And I mean, fuck, they're just so wrong. They had no idea.
Well, remember, they are a practitioner. Their job is to practice.
Yeah.
That's literally what they do for a living, is practice. Hey, try this. Okay, it didn't work. All right, try this instead. It's kind of like parenting.
I mean, I tip my hat to them because, you know, I can walk. So
yeah,
thanks for that.
Yeah,
but
yeah.
Other than that,
well, I mean, I just think that, especially for military doctors, if they're handed a freaking, you know, sacrificial soup sandwich and told, here, try to save this, you can't really fault them that much for saying, no, you can't save this. So, I mean, I don't have like too much animus toward them or anything like that. Like they sucked. They probably were really good doctors. But they had to work within the law of probability, and, you know, what that curve looks like as far as successful surgeries versus unsuccessful surgeries. And I mean, it's not like the Army would come back and say, oh, you guys suck because he can't walk. It's your fault, so you're not going to get promoted. It doesn't work that way. By then, they're probably out in a private practice and probably don't even remember who I was, honestly. And that's okay. I don't take that personal. But you know, when it's your leg, ultimately you have to realize that it's really your responsibility to make sure that you are well enough, and that they're making the right choice, the right decision. Like, you have to be involved in that process. Probably have to know a little bit about yourself too.
Yeah. It's
So,
it's crazy dealing with doctors because you're completely right. You got to be your own advocate,
you
even if
have
you
to,
know
yeah,
absolutely nothing about what's going on.
100%. I agree. Yeah.
Anyway,
Yeah.
I should let you eat your chili.
Well, hopefully my wife has eaten already, because she probably thought, oh, he's not coming out, so I'm just going to eat. But if she didn't, I'll apologize and tell her I'm really sorry. I owe her something. I owe her something for that.
Blame it on me. Say it's all my fault and tell her I say hi.
Oh, I will. I'll tell her.
All right.
You would probably really like my wife, because she's like one of those, like, she knows how to combine any 4 ingredients to make like just about anything. When I say my wife is a foodie, I'm exaggerating. I mean, I'm underselling it. She's amazing.
Well, that sounds like something that anybody would like, Good food.
Yeah.
Good food is like top of all of the things.
Yep. Yeah. Agreed.
Anyway.
All right.
Good talking
my
to you,
brother.
Skip.
I'll talk to you soon. And hey, don't forget to toast the collapse, because it is underway.
It sure is. Free falling.
Yep. Yeah, that's a good song. I might want to listen to that tomorrow. I might put that on as like a I don't know. There's probably a couple other songs that I'd be really good for the collapse. Maybe I'll make a Collapsitarian playlist or something.
That's
for
a
the
good
collapse,
idea. Which is different than the Boogaloo.
Yeah.
The Boogaloo playlist has its own properties, and it's not the same as the collapse. They're two different things.
That's a good point. The collapse, it needs to sort of be like, it's tragic, but what can we do? It's already happening. Whereas like the Boogaloo, it's real.
That's when the people say, no, I've had enough. You're not going to crack that whip on me again. That's the way that's literally the way I look at
it. It seems like the collapse is so far down the road that the Boogaloo is just so close behind it. One thing has to go wrong, and then all of a sudden,
I would not have wanted to put money on which was going to come first.
No,
let's just say that, because I really, it would have been a crapshoot as to which was going to come first. And I'm not saying that this economy can't recover, because it can. Unfortunately, I think it actually can. But if we don't see a complete and utter demise of central banking systems the way they operate now, we're going to be back doing the exact drudgery that we've been doing for the last however many 13 years. And it's appalling that people have put up with this shit as long as they have. So quite frankly, as sad as it is for all these people that are losing so much of their money, they need to understand that there's been so much more of it that's been stolen from them and their purchasing power, that they should be angry instead of upset at the loss of their money. They should be angry that it's been stolen for so long.
100%. It's going to be interesting these next 4 months.
Yeah. All right, my brother, be well, and good luck with the chickens.
Thank you. I will talk to you again soon.
Absolutely. Take care.
Bye.
All right. Bye.